Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Alec Pollard, coming to you live from Israel with the biggest stories in the region. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will reportedly present U.S. President Donald Trump with new plans for a potential strike on Iran when he visits the president at Mar-a-Lago at the end of the month. Jerusalem is deeply concerned that Tehran is not only rebuilding its nuclear program, damaged in the June war, but is also ramping up ballistic missile production, potentially 3,000 per month if left unchecked. Israel sees the missiles as an immediate threat, fearing they could deter Israeli action against Iran or its regional proxies. In response to the reports, White House spokesperson Anna Kelly told reporters, as President Trump has said, if Iran pursued a nuclear weapon, that site would be attacked and would be wiped out before they even got close. U.S. strikes in Syria have killed at least 5 ISIS operatives, including a key cell leader, in a major retaliation against the Islamist terror group. U.S. officials say American forces fired more than 100 munitions at over 70 ISIS targets across central and eastern Syria, including weapons depots, tunnels, and operational facilities, in what Syrian sources described as an intense bombardment lasting around 5 hours. Jordan's Air Force confirmed it took part in the U.S.-led operation, saying the goal was to prevent ISIS from using Syria as a launch pad to threaten regional security, including Israel's neighbors. President Donald Trump called the operation a massive strike.
And I'm also pleased to announce that just 2 hours ago, we hit the ISIS thugs in Syria who were trying to regroup after their decimation by the Trump administration 5 years ago. We hit them hard. I ordered a massive strike on the terrorists that killed our 3 great patriots last week. 2 soldiers, 1 interpreter, all great people. And it was very successful. It was precision. We hit every site flawlessly, and we are restoring peace through strength. We're all over the world.
According to Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam, the first phase of a plan to disarm Hezbollah south of the Litani River will be completed within a few days. The claim is being met with deep skepticism in Jerusalem and doubts from Washington. Israeli officials have repeatedly warned that similar promises in the past were never fully implemented, and that Hezbollah has a long record of hiding weapons, redeploying fighters, and operating underground despite international agreements. This comes amid growing concerns of a renewed conflict between Israel and the Iran-backed terror group. Israel insists any disarmament must be verifiable, irreversible, and enforced on the ground, not just declared by Beirut. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio struck a cautious tone, stopping short of expressing confidence that Hezbollah will actually be disarmed.
And we have tried to, in a cooperative way, to do everything we can to empower the Lebanese government to have the ability to do that. And so I hope that's what these talks are aimed towards, and we'll be supportive in every way we can to achieve that outcome. What I think is abundantly clear to everybody is no one is in favor of a Hezbollah that can once again threaten the region, act as a direct Iranian proxy, and obviously if they threaten Israel, we're not going to have peace. So we are hopeful that the talks between Lebanese authorities and the Israelis will create outlines and a way forward that prevents further conflict. I think I don't speak for the Israeli government. I can only tell you and echo what they've said publicly, and that is that if they feel threatened by Hezbollah, they will take actions in their defense against them.
The IDF says it killed 2 Palestinian terror operatives who crossed the Gaza ceasefire line. They approached reservists in a way the military said posed an immediate threat. The Israeli Air Force then struck and eliminated the terrorists. Separately, the army released footage showing the demolition of Hamas tunnels on the Israeli side of the Yellow Line in the Khan Yunis area. Meanwhile, mediators of the fragile Gaza ceasefire expressed support for U.S. President Donald Trump's peace plan, though sources said little progress was made in recent meetings beyond the current truce. A joint statement by the U.S., Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey contained no new announcements, but urged Israel and Hamas to show restraint and avoid a return to war. The mediators called for the swift establishment of a board of peace and a technocratic government to manage post-war Gaza, while sources said moving to phase 2 will require compromises on IDF withdrawals and Hamas disarmament. Now, to break down all of these issues that are going on in the region, we have Dr. Nir Boms, a Syria researcher at Tel Aviv University, and Avi Melamed, Middle East expert. Thank you, both of you, for coming here to discuss these issues. I want to start with you, Avi, and these reports about a possible future strike, let's say, against Iran. Does that mean that the Iranian nuclear program is already rebuilding? And also, is it even possible in the current political climate in the United States to actually get the approval of President Trump and his team to conduct such a strike, a second strike?
Thank you for having me. Look, indeed, it's a very significant threat, and we should look at it very seriously. The major issue currently is more about the ballistic missiles and the capacities of the Iranians to renew and even in a greater pace manufacturing of those missiles. I'm not so sure to say about the nuclear side, because there is some vague picture regarding what exactly is the situation there following the US strike. But the major concern right now, is, to the best of my reading, is particularly in the context of the Iranian long-term missiles, which is very clear, according to all reports coming in, that the Iranians are putting a lot of efforts in not only renewing the arsenal, but basically producing in a larger pace.
Right. Neil, you see what's going on now in Syria that you've looked at closely over the years. Is ISIS really, maybe let's say, regaining a foothold there? And what is the relationship between al-Shara and ISIS? I mean, al-Shara used to be an al-Qaeda commander. We know that Trump doesn't view him that way, views him as a legitimate leader. But could the jihadists of ISIS actually see in al-Shara a person who might let them get away with stuff that Assad didn't?
Look, at the peak of the Syrian war, we've had about 1,000 militias in Syria. Some of them belong to Islamist groups, some of them belongs to groups that were more secular, some of them were more liberal. And Ashara's task was to try and consolidate all of this into a Syrian army. It is clear to anyone who's watching this, not just in Syria, but elsewhere, that this is a mammoth challenge, not one that can be done swiftly and quickly. I don't think that the last episode is a sign that ISIS or Al-Qaeda is gaining strength in Syria, but it's a worrying sign that Ashara is not able to still consolidate power. And also because there is some relations between these particular militias and the Syrian security forces, and that was, by the way, also the case with the force that had 2 weeks before the fighting and the ambush with the IDF forces at the village of Bejin. It means that the Syrian security forces are not divorced from the influence of radical forces. And that really is the more difficult issue at hand here. The challenge of Ashara, and at least in theory, that's what he's supposed to do, he wants to get rid of these militias. It doesn't help him to have militias that do not adhere to Damascus and that he cannot control. And if now some of these militias are integrating in some ways inside in his own security forces, it's a double problem, because A, he still cannot control them, and B, now it becomes also a militia and also a part of his own security forces. And then, of course, either we or the Americans needs to intervene to take them down. So all of this is not positive for the consolidation of the Syrian military, but we still should not assume that now everything is collapsing. This is still local forces. The challenge still remains. These forces needs to be taken down either by Israel, the US, or even preferably by Syria itself, so that there's going to be one military that's going to be able to really create border arrangements and distance these types of militias from the Israeli border and broadly from Syria itself.
Avi, what do you think? Do you agree with that assessment of the situation in Syria right now?
Yes, of course, I join Dr. Bons with his analysis. I will add something else in that regard, that even before that incident with ISIS, we should remember that Shara is coming, as you said before, from the Salafi jihadi groups. He was the leader of Al-Qaeda. He was at least at some form associated also with people from ISIS. The issue is that he has not been able to establish firmly his rule in Syria. And one of the major challenges, in addition to the story of ISIS, or maybe it joins that story, is that we should remember that within the inner circles that al-Shara is coming from, there is some sort of like discontent, there is some sort of like criticism on Shara because his policy viewed by his old members, old colleagues to the Salafi jihadi groups, his policy seems like as if he's basically out of line. He's kind of like deserting, quote unquote, the way or the path of Salafi jihad and turning more and more towards more moderate, pragmatic, some would even say westernized approach. That also present Shara some sort of like an inner challenges. There has been reports, for example, that in both cases, the story of the massacres of Alawites in the Syrian coast, as well as the collision with the Druze in the south part of Syria, was in a way some sort of like a signal from within a Shara camp by those members in this camp that are not so much satisfied with his direction. There was even reports, maybe Dr. Booms could elaborate on that, I didn't find any verification for that, that there was even reports about failed assassination attempts against the Shara. I don't know to say if it's accurate or not, but I would say that this is also something that we should pay attention to.
Neil, those assassination attempts, are those credible reports?
I have seen at least 7 different ones. And again, this is not something that's surprising. It's the conventional wisdom that Ashara is trying to create a balancing act. If you understand Syria, you understand that you need to create a balance and a degree of power sharing if you want to keep Syria intact. If you're trying to create another dictatorship, which is going to be an Islamic dictatorship, very, very quickly, you're going to get all the minorities, 40%, which is significant, including the Druze and the Kurds, who have significant also security and weapons, resources, as well as many of the seculars coming against you. I think Ashara broadly understands this, and he's trying to create a balance, a balancing act. But the people around him, in Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the people on the Idlib circle, not all of them agree with the idea that Syria needs to be more pluralistic or more accepting. And some of them are trying to act, against it. And of course, they're not the only ones. We have seen with the Alawites, with the Iranians, different attempts to gain influence. We've seen that the Russians are trying to do the same. And some of that is trying to play with forces that are not loyal to Ashara and create this type of old militia dynamic. The broader challenge for everyone is to see if Ashara is really serious in his intention to actually help him with this by dismantling the radical forces. And that's an interesting idea because at least there is a possibility that dismantling these militias and these radical forces, including ISIS, is an interest of the America, the United States, the United States, Syria, but also Israel. And if there is a way to do this together, then that's going to be a win-win for all sides.
Right. Well, basically what you're describing in Syria is one of the problems that we see in a lot of countries in the Middle East, which is the inner sectarian fighting between the different groups. And of course, a country that has famously suffered from this problem is Lebanon. So let's go and talk about Lebanon and Hezbollah, where we hear that the Lebanese government claim that they're moving towards disarming Hezbollah south of the Litani. And we've been in this scenario before after the 2006 war as well. They weren't supposed to be armed on the Israeli border, and yet they were. So what do you think, Avi? I mean, we're hearing Marco Rubio didn't sound that optimistic about it. Certainly Israeli officials are quite, let's say, skeptical of this. Should they be?
Yes, definitely. Look, the Lebanese army is not going to disarm Hezbollah. No, we have to remember the Lebanese government, though formally instructed the Lebanese army to prepare a plan for the disarmament of Hezbollah, no one has any illusions about it. And basically, they know that the Lebanese army is not going to do that. Now, the big story in the end of the day is the United States, because we have to be very careful when we listen to the American statements. What basically Rubio said in between the line to Israel particularly was, he said that if Israel feel that Hezbollah is forming a threat, then Israel will act. Feel is something very vague, and I think that what we are looking at is some sort of a direction or trajectory where in the end of the day, there will be some sort of like what I call belly dancing solution, meaning they will kind of like partly disarm and then they will basically think about some sort of a formula that will remain all sides keeping face. I think that in the end of the day, Israel, in the end of the day, will find itself in a quite challenging situation because the current American administration, he sets the bar according to his wish and his outlook. And if President Trump or someone else on behalf of President Trump will say that there is a satisfactory situation in Lebanon in terms of the disarmament of Hezbollah, that presents Israel with a significant challenge because I found it very difficult to see how the Israeli current government is going to defy or act not with full coordination with the Trump administration. The bottom line, the Hezbollah basically made it very clear it's not going to disarm itself. The Iranians obviously are continuing to push forward to the rebuilding and rearming of the Hezbollah. The bottom line with this whole story, same old story, the weakness of the state, in that case, Lebanon on the one hand, and the power of the semi-state actors, in our case, when we talk about Lebanon, Hezbollah, present a very, I would say, complex regional equilibrium. And by the way, it's not only in the context of Hezbollah, it's also in the context of Hamas in Gaza, and it's also in the context of Iraqi Shiite militias in Iraq.
Hezbollah's situation at the moment, after Assad was ousted, after a certain weakening of Iran, of Hamas, how much do those outside factors, or have those outside factors, influence, let's say, the strength of Hezbollah and also the support that Hezbollah has internally in Lebanon to continue to kind of flout these agreements and potentially drag Lebanon into a war with Israel in the future?
Well,
Neil.
I would say significantly. First of all, Syria is a very important factor here. Syria has been the oxygen line when it comes to Hezbollah. This is where from which weapons were able to enter. There was a relatively free traffic, and the Iranians have established forward positions in Syria, and then later on were able to incorporate Hezbollah in the Syrian war, going to the side of Assad. The fact that right now we have a different administration, a different regime, a different government in Syria that is not accepting the Iranian influence is important, significant, and we need to keep it this way, and that's crucial. And that means that the Iranians have a harder time to support Hezbollah, even if they wish to. And that also means that we're now in a different situation compared to 2006 or to other agreements. We actually have a Lebanese government that has more motivation to deal with this challenge. And I think we've also seen, and we can say, that Hezbollah has been the weakest it has been. And all of that means that the government of Lebanon is doing something. I agree with my colleague, with Avi, that part of the challenge would be the announcement. I mean, we have an agreement in Gaza, and Hamas is, at least theoretically, supposed to disarm as well. But we've seen the reality. It was relatively easy for Trump to declare end of hostilities and the end of war. And that may be useful for a potential Nobel Peace announcement, but it's not necessarily stopping the war either in Gaza or in Lebanon. But what is happening in Lebanon is that the informality of, on the one hand, Israel is able to act, sometimes with a bit of an upsetting the Americans, but still to actually help the Lebanese weaken Hezbollah further. And it is very clear that if Israel would not do that, the Lebanese government would not be able to do what it can do in order to disarm Hezbollah. And then the next question on Lebanon is the next elections, and whether there's going to be more political factions that will rise against Hezbollah and will try to make Lebanon again, or make the Lebanese state a state again. Because once we have a militia that is actually stronger and has a different foreign policy and a different policy than the state, and it has a military force that is larger and stronger than the state itself, Lebanon cannot be Lebanon. And the ceasefire, of course, is going to last until it is able to last, but with still a very significant motivation of Hezbollah, not necessarily of Lebanon, to continue atrocities.
Right, ceasefire is very fragile, and a fragile ceasefire in Gaza. Avi, we had this little flare up here where some fighters were killed in Gaza, and all this while the talks have progressed towards this international stabilization force, so to speak. But it doesn't seem like many countries are that interested in taking part, except for Turkey, which Israel doesn't want.
Yes, that's correct, because the bottom line, very similar to the story of Lebanon, Hamas is saying, I'm not going to disarm myself. And now the big question, who is going to disarm Hamas? The answer is nobody other than Israel. And Israel says, we are not going back to the situation pre-October 7, and if nobody else is going to disarm Hamas, Israel is going to disarm Hamas forcefully. The meaning of that is the resume of the fight. Hamas, meanwhile, is rebuilding its power in Gaza Strip. He is re-recruiting more militants to its ranks, trying to regenerate or rejuvenate its military industry capacity, sort of speaking. So all in all, when you look at the whole situation on the ground, you come to the almost inevitable conclusion that it's only a question of time until we'll see resume of the fight under those circumstances. Now, obviously, none of the other states is going to send their troops to Gaza Strip to be involved in a direct collision with Hamas over the issue of the disarmament. Not less significant is the fact that the Saudis and the Emirates that are supposed to be the one with the deep pockets that will share the burden of rehabilitation of Gaza Strip that is estimated at some, I don't know, $70 billion. The Saudis and the Emirates are saying very clearly out loud, they're saying, we are not going to invest in the rehabilitation as long as Hamas is not disarmed. So all in all, you find yourself in a closed loop. And when you find yourself in a closed loop, in most of the cases, apparently the only way out is through some very dramatic or drastic or violent move on the ground, hence the growing probability for the resume of the fight. Once again, Israel in the context of Gaza, like in the context of Lebanon, Israel finds itself in a very challenging situation because Israel has to first and foremost pay attention very closely to the demands and priorities of Trump administration. We saw that in the case in the war with Iran. We saw that in the case in the situation in Lebanon. We see that currently also in the case of the situation in Gaza Strip. All in all, a similar situation between Gaza and Lebanon in two major aspects. One, both semi-state actors, meaning Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Islamic Jihad in Gaza Strip, refuse to disarm themselves. There is no power that is going to disarm them willingly. And the other thing is the role of the United States that in the end of the day plays a very significant role in the shaping of the Israeli government position. I would even say more than that, basically twisting the arm of the Israeli government and dictating the trajectory ahead.
Well, this is kind of the problem, though, is that Trump, with good intentions, wants to push forward with his plan to rebuild Gaza, while the reality on the ground is not quite there. Now we're hearing this plan of the Riviera that's come up again, the Gaza Riviera, the luxury hotels, and the AI-powered Gaza Strip, while Hamas are rearming and saying the eternal war with Israel is still on. So, Neil, there's the last question before we have to go. How is this, when is the reality going to kick in, if at all, with these plans when they just hit the brick wall of the reality in Gaza?
I actually think that the reality is kicking in all of these scenarios, and actually more so in Gaza. Because in Gaza, we now have a de facto new border. It's called a yellow line, and this is the line that delineates where the IDF has control and where Hamas has control. The line is supposed to be moved and getting moved into the control of the forces that may or may not come following the phase 2 of the plan. But what we began to see and what we may see is that the rehabilitation and the plans for Gaza will actually continue, but not in all parts of Gaza. Under Hamas, the people will continue to live under the dictatorship of Hamas, under the yoke of Hamas, and under a continuation of a very fragile ceasefire that potentially can emerge into a low intensity war. But in the other parts of Gaza, we may be able to see, and as we begin to see, reconstruction, schools, a better education, better supplies, eventually buildings. And at some point, some of those who are now in tents under Hamas will be asked, do you want to stay there or do you want to move to the better part of Gaza? And there is a chance that that dynamic will begin to happen and eventually continue to weaken Hamas from within on a long term. And that's assuming that Hamas, again, is not going to do it willingly, that the peace forces are not going to be willing to actually enter and dismantle Hamas itself. And therefore, we'll have this limbo situation in where one part of Gaza will begin to benefit from the peace plan and from the reconstruction, and another part of Gaza under Hamas will remain and hopefully eventually get weakened or suffocated by these dynamics, and the people will help themselves choose whether they want to stay under Hamas and continue the struggle, or whether they want to go to Gaza and rebuild their lives. And then we'll see if better new leadership will emerge that will open some additional options for the future. This is all a bit of a medium to long-term vision, and it's not going to happen overnight.
Certainly a very complex situation in Gaza, a lot of things at play. The stakes are very high. Nir Balms from the Tel Aviv University, Syria researcher, and Avi Melamed, Middle East expert. Thank you both of you for coming on and sharing your analysis.
Thank you for having us. Bye-bye.
More news from Gaza, where the UN Food Monitor now confirms famine conditions have ended. The International Food Security Phase Classification, IPC, says Gaza is no longer in Phase 5 catastrophe, and that famine is not prevailing anywhere in the Strip, claiming the ceasefire and a sharp increase in humanitarian aid since October 10th are responsible. However, the organization still classified Gaza as being in Phase 4, an emergency level of food insecurity, a claim Israel strongly disputes, along with the famine accusation, which did not materialize into widespread hunger-related deaths. Israel's Kogat agency, which coordinates aid into Gaza, called the report distorted, biased, and unfounded, saying it misleads the international community and ignores verified data. According to Kogat, more than 500,000 metric tons of food have entered Gaza since the ceasefire, far exceeding the population's nutritional requirements, including those accepted by the IPC itself. Earlier today in Jerusalem, President Isaac Herzog and World Zionist Organization Chairman Yaakov Hagoel took part in the lighting of the 8th Hanukkah candle, along with 15 memorial candles lit in honor of the victims in a ceremony linking Jerusalem with the Jewish community of Sydney, Australia. The event was held via live video broadcast as a joint act of solidarity. In Sydney, members of the Jewish community gathered at Bondi Beach, the site of the deadly terror attack in which 15 people were killed, in order to commemorate the victims and remember them while lighting the before last candle of Hanukkah. This is the, we see the cooperation and the shared memory here across the oceans between Israel and Australia, and this event here where the Israeli president took part as well. That is all for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. You can scan the QR code on your screen for all the latest updates, also at our ILTV app. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next time.
Your dream apartment in the holiest city in the world is just a click away. Am Yisrael Chai, the lifeline for so many chesed operations in Israel, is holding their annual Dream Raffle, where one ticket only can buy you a luxurious apartment in the heart of Jerusalem. Don't win the apartment? No problem! All raffle proceeds from all tickets go directly to one of the incredible organizations that Am Yisrael Chai supports. And for the first time ever, the apartment is fully furnished. Don't miss this incredible opportunity to actively donate to Israel's functionality and, on the way, potentially score big and win the apartment of a lifetime. Scan the QR code now to join. When you buy from Blessed by Israel, you're not just shopping, you're standing with the families of Israel's heartland. Every bottle of delicious olive oil, handcrafted necklace, or jar of honey carries the spirit of Judea and Samaria. These, along with many more products, are the tastes, scents, and stories of the Promised Land, made by people rebuilding our biblical homeland every day. Shop now at blessedbyisrael.com and use ILTV's special code BLESSISRAEL for 10% off on your first order.
Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel. So if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land, we're here for you. I'm Ladar Gaveh-Lazi, and this is ILTV's Weekly Review.
And joining us now is Joe Truzman, a senior researcher, analyst, and editor at FDDS's Long War Journal. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we heard these brand new comments from Netanyahu overnight, specifically talking about rescuing the hostages. Tell me what you think this means, and do you think he's being realistic? Could these hostages potentially be rescued?
Right. There's always the potential for hostages to be rescued. I think, though, over the last few months, at least since earlier this year when the ceasefire collapsed, we've observed the IDF rescue, at least recover the bodies of hostages. However, we haven't seen any of them rescued alive. And I think that's paramount here is to rescue these hostages alive, at least the ones that are still in Gaza. So I think this is important. I'm not sure if it's going to happen that with the current strategy that the IDF has, that the IDF is employing. It may have reached its limits already. So I think a ceasefire may be the best option here for Israel to get at least the live hostages back, and of course recover the bodies of the other hostages.
But is that ceasefire deal realistic, in your opinion? Do you feel like this momentum that everyone keeps talking about from the Iran and Israel ceasefire, that momentum could be now shifted to this part of the region, and a ceasefire and a hostage deal could be reached in the near future?
I mean, I think the problem here is that there are certain obstacles that have impeded a ceasefire deal for many months now. And I think those obstacles is that, specifically, one of the obstacles is that whether Hamas stays in power or not. All right. I think this is obviously something that Israel does not want. And conversely, Hamas wants to stay in power. But so these are very difficult questions that need to be answered. And I think both sides, Hamas and Israel, will have to give some leeway here with their demands if they want a ceasefire. But I think time is against both Hamas and Israel right now, considering all the factors that are involved here. So, I think it is possible, but we have to be careful here. We've seen ceasefire deals almost be achieved in the last more than a year and a half, but obviously we know only a couple of them have lasted for so long. So we'll have to wait and see.
I know, and we have to remember the toll it takes on these families that have been waiting almost 2 years at this point to get their loved ones back. These conversations, of officials saying there's optimism and then things don't come to fruition. It's a painful game that they're stuck in, and it's a very unfair system that they have to deal with. Tell me why you think there's so much pressure from President Donald Trump at this point in time to get a deal reached.
Right. I mean, as you said, it's almost been 2 years of war. I think there are also other factors, specifically Israel normalizing relations, ties with countries in the region. And I think President Trump wants that to advance. And what's impeding that is the war in Gaza. All right. I think that's why we're starting to see more pressure on Israel here to get a ceasefire deal, as we saw with the recent post by President Trump. So, but I think it has a lot to do with the advancing normalization with countries in the region.
Right, and we just heard in an interview yesterday from President Donald Trump that there could be even more countries that are interested in joining the Abraham Accords. Tell me, do you think Israel has accomplished their war objectives inside of Gaza?
I think they've gone much farther than I expected. Started tracking this war, obviously, since more than a year and a half ago. And to be quite honest, I didn't expect the successes that they've had so far. Yahya Sinwar's dead. Many of his lieutenants are dead. Obviously, his brother's been eliminated recently. So Hamas is severely degraded. Severely, all right. They're still operating, but they aren't what they were pre-October 7th, and that's I think that's a success for the Israelis, to be quite honest with you. Whether Hamas stays in power after this is over, that's another question. And this may be a sacrifice that Israel has to make to get the hostages back. That is, of course, to leave Hamas in power, unfortunately, in the Gaza Strip. Right, and we know that Israel is saying they're still hitting specific infrastructure sites inside of Gaza as well. And we actually know just from yesterday, I believe, that the IDF actually managed to eliminate one of the founders of Hamas. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's one of the reports that actually came in, as they are still continuing to target very specific people inside of the Gaza Strip. Any take on that? I know we're a little bit short on time, but quick take. Right. So, yeah, listen, Israel's been doing a great job degrading Hamas's infrastructure, eliminating personnel, as you mentioned. So this is an important achievement. So Hamas is beat now. However, they're not completely down. Nevertheless, I think the IDF's current strategy has hit its limit. So now Israel has to decide: do we want a ceasefire or do we want to keep going? Thank you so much, Joe, for joining us in this conversation. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
And President Trump says Israel has agreed to the necessary conditions for a 60-day ceasefire and hostage deal, but Israeli officials have yet to publicly comment. ILTV's Shosh Bedrosian is in Hostages Square now in Tel Aviv with more details. Shosh, what can you tell us?
Well, Lidar, we know that Israel's Minister of Strategic Affairs has been in the United States meeting with American officials this week. Now, there are media reports out there about what this proposal likely says, and there's two different takes on it. One of them would be that 10 living hostages would be released in the 60 days, and the bodies of 18 hostages would also be released within that 60-day time period. Now, apparently, according to another media report, Qatar submitted another new proposal to Israel for a 60-day ceasefire, with 8 living hostages released on the first day of the ceasefire and 2 more living hostages released on the 50th day of the ceasefire. It is very obvious, and it has been since these negotiations first started, even back in October of 2023. Hamas uses these hostages as leverage to keep their power inside of the Gaza Strip. And we know that there are several sticking points as to the differences between Israel and Hamas. Hamas wanting to see this war completely ending, but Israel wanting an opportunity to renew fighting after the 60 days of this ceasefire to completely dismantle and disarm the terror organization that still rules the Gaza Strip, causing its own people, the Palestinian people, to suffer as well. Now, I spoke with Israelis today who, of course, have mixed emotions about how they want to see a ceasefire and a possible end to the war come to fruition.
It's very hard to be on either side. Even if I'm not physically harmed, I can have empathy for obviously for Israelis, for hostages, for soldiers, and I can have empathy for pain in general, and I don't like war. On the other side, some people would say that you need to show force in order to achieve what you want in the Middle East. So it's just such a complicated thing. So first of all, I would like the hostages to be back. I think that everyone would like that. The question is, what is the price?
And joining us now to discuss all of this news is Rawan Osman, a Syrian-Lebanese peace activist. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. First off, tell me what you think about this potential news that these two leaders could speak. Of course, it would be very historic for the region.
Since the fall of Assad, I did say on Israeli TV repeatedly that Syria will be next to join the Abraham Accords, even before Lebanon, because I see the move, how swiftly the rebels and the jihadists got rid or overthrew Bashar al-Assad told me that this was a coordinated regional decision to close the corridor between Iran and Hezbollah. What happened is brilliant. I'm not saying trust Ashara. I do not trust him. He is a former Qaeda member, and his entourage are mostly former jihadists. But at the moment, they are the best we have, and they have other jihadists under control. Of course, these are historical moments, especially that it's very unusual for an Arab leader to speak positively about Israel. This is the importance of what is happening. And I'm happy that Israel did not welcome the gestures with open arms. I mean by that, you cannot let a terrorist in your backyard. Israel has enough to worry about at the moment, but they signaled openness. And I trust that the Israelis are intelligent enough to refuse to simply going back to the 1974 disengagement agreement. This is our opportunity to bring Syria and Lebanon into the Abraham Accords alliance, and nothing short of that is acceptable. But let's do it carefully.
Let me ask you.
The biggest challenge.
Go ahead, keep going.
The biggest challenge Ashara faces now is remaining alive. He needs to try and avoid assassination attempts. It happened already, but I believe with the Americans speaking about him positively, that their intelligence securities or forces or personnel on the ground or outside will help him survive this phase. And maybe we will see a peace agreement, a comprehensive peace agreement in the next year or two.
Do people inside of Syria and Lebanon, would they want their countries to join the Abraham Accords? Is that something that people talk about in these societies?
Definitely. You would be surprised. Lebanese and Syrians living abroad care less for peace, but those who live on the ground, those who face the consequences of the recklessness of the so-called axis of resistance, those who live in failed economies, those young men who were left with nothing but joining a jihadist organization because the world gave up on them. And we just accepted that Assad will live forever, just like many Iranians think Khamenei will live forever. Things are changing rapidly. Those on the ground are speaking in favor for a peace agreement with Israel. And if you ask, especially, I have access to that on social media. When I ask people, my followers, and they reply in the comments, would you like to see Damascus resembling Gaza or Dubai? And I ask the Lebanese, why are you so desperate to get a visa to go work in Abu Dhabi when Beirut could become even better? And you'd be surprised, the general mood is in favor.
Right. And I want to ask you, do you think there could be working relations between Israel and Syria in the near future? If so, what would those ties potentially look like?
I think those who paved the way for that to happen were the beautiful Druze communities. They were brave enough to cross the borders, to ignore the nonsensical imposed anti-normalization laws, because they have family members on the other side of the border. This could be the model. We can start with a community that we know will never stab us in the back. Slowly, maybe we can expand that. But as a trade partner, Syria would be brilliant. And Syria is in desperate need for collaboration with the Israelis, for the innovation, for the model Israel is in the region.
Right. Wow. A fascinating point about the Druze. So many Druze people have actually told me in the past they believe that they can be the keys to peace in the Middle East because they know what it takes to work both sides, be part of these different communities, and their families still live on different sides of the borders, and they still hold their traditions and culture so close to them. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
And as the IDF ground and air operations presses on in Gaza amidst pressure for a ceasefire hostage deal, joining us now to discuss is former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Michael Oren. Michael, thanks so much for being with us today.
Good to be with you, Shows.
First off, what does the meeting between Netanyahu and Trump signal next week? We know that the topics that we're hearing about right now, they might be discussing, of course, is the deal, a possible deal in Gaza, and Iran that's on the table. But what does this signal to us?
Well, first of all, it's a big table. The big issue now is what will happen if Iran tries to rebuild some of the nuclear facilities that were either obliterated, according to the president, or severely damaged, according to other sources. What will constitute a violation of the ceasefire in America's eyes? And if so, what is America willing to do, or what is America willing to let Israel do in response? To me, in many ways, that's the sort of the key issue here. Does Iran remain sort of out of the picture, or will Iran be able to reconstitute itself and rearm its proxies in the region? That's regard to Iran. Regarding Gaza specifically, what's on the table is the nature of the ceasefire. Now, Israel is willing to agree to a ceasefire in return for a certain number of hostages, but Israel wants to retain the right to renew fighting after the ceasefire expires. Now, that's a condition that Hamas adamantly rejects. Hamas wants the end of the war so it basically can win the war and come out of the tunnels and declare victory and begin to reconstitute its power in Gaza. So there's kind of almost a symmetry between the situation in Iran and the situation in Gaza, albeit at much bigger dimensions in Iran. But the question is, to what degree is the United States willing to stand behind Israel and its current government, because not everyone agrees with the position of the government, certainly about Gaza, in ensuring that Israel will have the ability to act if a ceasefire is violated and if the regime in Iran or Hamas in Gaza moves to rearm and reorganize.
Now, specifically back to the sticking points of this deal, you mentioned Israel wanting to go back in after, a temporary ceasefire happens. But this is something that's been going on now for months and months of being negotiated. How can there actually be a ceasefire? What will it take for a ceasefire to actually happen at this point in time? These are points that continue to be negotiated, and nothing has succeeded at this point in time.
Well, there are people in this country, and that could be a majority according to some polls, and significant members of the coalition even have said, okay, it's enough and enough. Let's just have an open-ended ceasefire and get all the hostages back. Give Hamas what it wants. Let Hamas come out of the tunnels and try to deal with the mess that's Gaza. And should they ever attack us again, even with a single rocket, we'll go back in and destroy them and have the Americans guarantee our ability to do that. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu has been very reluctant to agree to such a condition. He remembers Israel's withdrawal from Lebanon in 2000, when then Prime Minister Ehud Barak said, well, if Hezbollah violates the ceasefire, we can go back in. Netanyahu remembers Israel's withdrawal from Gaza in 2005, when Prime Minister Ariel Sharon said, well, if Hamas violates the ceasefire, we can go back in. Once you're getting out, it's not so easy to go back in. That's the lesson of history. So now we'll try to convince the president in Washington to stand by him as he says, okay, the only agreement that Israel can truly accept will be one that will enable Israel at the end of the ceasefire, should it choose to renew the fighting.
Right. I mean, once Netanyahu and Trump meet, would it be possible for immediate change to come out of this type of meeting? What realistically will happen here?
Well, my sources in Washington are telling me some very fantastic things, that President Trump has not abandoned his idea of creating a resort-type area in Gaza. And as Israel has been gaining control over 75% of the Strip, moving the Palestinian population southward, it could easily be interpreted as a precursor to the realization of President Trump's vision of this, this Riviera on the Mediterranean. So you can't rule that out either. There are many options here. And I think it's clear, though, that the Prime Minister and the President want to see an end to the fighting in Gaza. And keep in mind, it's not just the Palestinians are suffering, Israelis are suffering. We've lost 20 soldiers this month alone fighting in Gaza. And increasingly, Israelis are uncertain, unclear, what are these soldiers dying for?
Right. What can President Trump's influence be on a ceasefire? You just mentioned what your sources are telling you about, his plan to continue to turn Gaza into a Riviera at some point. But ultimately, how do you get Hamas out of the Gaza Strip? It seems as if they continue to recruit people inside parts in specific parts of the Gaza Strip.
Well, they're recruiting thousands, but most of them are young people, and they can't really be trained. So they don't constitute the same type of military threat. I remember I mentioned the asymmetry between Iran and Gaza, but there's a broader symmetry, and that is Israel has won a partial military victory in Gaza. It has won a partial military victory in Lebanon against Hezbollah, and a partial military victory against Iran. We haven't defeated Hamas entirely, we haven't defeated Hezbollah entirely, and we haven't defeated Iran entirely militarily. But what we have won in Gaza, and certainly in Lebanon, is a strategic victory that neither Hamas nor Hezbollah no longer threaten us the way they did before the war. And it's led to be seen whether, Iran will go back to pose a strategic threat against the state of Israel, and whether Hamas will go back to pose a strategic threat to the state of Israel. That's really what's on the table here, shows how do we move forward and build on these military victories, which, although partial, can lead to a strategic triumph, which will change the entire Middle East. We can have peace with Syria, peace with Lebanon, peace with other countries in the region, but only provided that Iran and its proxies cannot regroup and rearm.
Let's talk about Iran just very, very fast. Could military operations continue inside of the Islamic Republic?
Yes, because I'm unconvinced that the Iranian public is going to desist and just sort of accept its fate. The Iranian leaders may view this war very differently. They could think that, well, we've held out against the world's biggest military power. We caused extensive damage to Israel. We learned Israel's weak point, which is civilian casualties. We have a president of the United States who bombed nuclear facilities, but when we shot rockets back at Qatar, the United States immediately sued for a ceasefire and pressured Israel to accept that ceasefire. They could do this very differently, and if I were a betting man, I would say that they're going to try to test this ceasefire. They're going to try to see whether we're going to try building one of the nuclear facilities or rearming the ballistic missile arsenals or the restoring the launchers, and see whether the United States will react and whether the United States will let Israel react.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Michael Oren. Thank you for your perspective, as always, here.
Thank you, sir.
And last night, millions of Israelis in Jerusalem and the coastal plain were forced to shelter last night by the launching of a single ballistic missile fired by the Houthis in Yemen. The missile was successfully intercepted by air defense, and there were no injuries or damages reported. The attack came a week after the end of the 12-day air war between Israel and Iran, and surprised many in Israel who had gotten used to a week without rocket warnings. Referring to a recent airstrike on the Iranian capital, Katz said that Yemen will be treated like Tehran. Katz said after striking the head of the snake in Iran, we will also strike the Houthis in Yemen, adding that whoever raises a hand against Israel, that hand will be cut off. And U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee weighing in after the Houthis' attack, suggesting that B-2 bombers need to visit Yemen. The U.S. used B-2 bombers to carry out strikes earlier against several nuclear targets in Iran. For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at ILTV.tv or download the ILTV Plus app. That's it for ILTV's weekly review. See you next week. And in Israel, 4,000 people will go missing every year, something that most people might not know. But it's organizations like the Israel Dog Unit that are the first responders when it comes to search and rescue and security. ILTV's Devo Klein spent the day in Kfar Tapuach visiting the headquarters of the Israel Dog Unit. Let's see what she got up to.
These are the organizations you don't hear about, but maybe you should. Saving lives in Israel at every opportunity they can. This is the Israel Dog Unit.
The Israel Dog Unit otherwise known as IDU, not to be confused with IDF, but we work with them regularly. We do security work. We help the Army with special operations, with dogs and handlers. And we also help the police and the Army look for missing people.
Volunteers from around Israel and even the world come together to achieve this mission of the Israel Dog Unit.
I got involved because I felt this was a very worthy cause after that. Training courses, it's very fulfilling in many ways. We spend a lot of time in the field with other great organizations, and the unique aspect of dogs, which I'm a big dog lover, mixing the highest levels of technology in the field. It's almost like CSI work in some ways, but in other ways investigative work, working together close with the police and the Army.
Our mission is to save Jewish lives in Israel with dogs, with drones, with horses, with whatever means at our disposal.
This unit is one of a kind. People and dogs working side by side to save lives in the heartland of the Jewish state. We got to meet some of the dogs of the unit.
So this is IP. She's a search and rescue dog, and she's very good at what she does. Dogs are more simple in a way. For sure, every dog has his own character, but if you give them their needs, and they're gonna be the best partners in the world. They're the best friend that there is.
Their mission is massive, but it is not yet complete. To operate to save lives, the Israel Dog Unit needs you.
My message to the viewers of ILTV is to come home to Israel. You want to do something meaningful, come and volunteer here. We'll provide room and board. This could be your first step to making Aliyah, but even if you don't make Aliyah, come here, we'll give you something meaningful to do. You can go out with us on a daily basis looking for missing people and saving lives in Israel. Is there anything greater, more important, more meaningful that you can think of doing? And of course, those of you that can't come, you can help support the unit financially. We rely solely on the donations of good people around the world that support the unit. And they're our partners in all the successes that we have, whether it's saving lives from terrorist attacks or whether it's finding missing people and saving their lives.
The Israel Dog Unit embodies the true spirit of Israel, unity and dedication to life-saving no matter what.
As someone that goes out to these searches, you see the family of the people, you see the close people, you see how they feel, and you really get attached to them. You see the daughter or the sister, you really feel connected. You say, I'm gonna do everything to find this person. It's very hard to see these people in such a hard time. And then if we find the person, you see how happy they are, and that will change lives.
Thank you. That's Israeli culture for you right there. The Israel Dog Unit is supported by Am Yisrael Chai, and their annual dream raffle to win a luxury apartment in Jerusalem is in full swing. You can win the apartment of your dreams by supporting Am Yisrael Chai. And if you don't win, you are still supporting the Israel Dog Unit, allowing them to continue their mission of saving lives in Israel.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Alec Pollard, coming to you live from Israel with the biggest stories in the region. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will reportedly present U.S. President Donald Trump with new plans for a potential strike on Iran when he visits the president at Mar-a-Lago at the end of the month. Jerusalem is deeply concerned that Tehran is not only rebuilding its nuclear program, damaged in the June war, but is also ramping up ballistic missile production, potentially 3,000 per month if left unchecked. Israel sees the missiles as an immediate threat, fearing they could deter Israeli action against Iran or its regional proxies. In response to the reports, White House spokesperson Anna Kelly told reporters, as President Trump has said, if Iran pursued a nuclear weapon, that site would be attacked and would be wiped out before they even got close. U.S. strikes in Syria have killed at least 5 ISIS operatives, including a key cell leader, in a major retaliation against the Islamist terror group. U.S. officials say American forces fired more than 100 munitions at over 70 ISIS targets across central and eastern Syria, including weapons depots, tunnels, and operational facilities in what Syrian sources described as an intense bombardment, lasting around 5 hours. Jordan's Air Force confirmed it took part in the U.S.-led operation, saying the goal was to prevent ISIS from using Syria as a launch pad to threaten regional security, including Israel's neighbors. President Donald Trump called the operation a massive strike.
And I'm also pleased to announce that just 2 hours ago, we hit the ISIS thugs in Syria who were trying to regroup after their decimation by the Trump administration 5 years ago. We hit them hard. I ordered a massive strike on the terrorists that killed our 3 great patriots last week. 2 soldiers, 1 interpreter, all great people. And it was very successful. It was precision. We hit every site flawlessly, and we are restoring peace through strength. We're all over the world.
According to Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam, the first phase of a plan to disarm Hezbollah south of the Litani River will be completed within a few days. The claim is being met with deep skepticism in Jerusalem and doubts from Washington. Israeli officials have repeatedly warned that similar promises in the past were never fully implemented, and that Hezbollah has a long record of hiding weapons, redeploying fighters, and operating underground despite international agreements. This comes amid growing concerns of a renewed conflict between Israel and the Iran-backed terror group. Israel insists any disarmament must be verifiable, irreversible, and enforced on the ground, not just declared by Beirut. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio struck a cautious tone, stopping short of expressing confidence that Hezbollah will actually be disarmed.
And we have tried to, in a cooperative way, to do everything we can to empower the Lebanese government to have the ability to do that. And so I hope that's what these talks are aimed towards, and we'll be supportive in every way we can to achieve that outcome. What I think is abundantly clear to everybody is no one is in favor of a Hezbollah that can once again threaten the region, act as a direct Iranian proxy, and obviously if they threaten Israel, we're not going to have peace. So we are hopeful that the talks between Lebanese authorities and the Israelis will create outlines and a way forward that prevents further conflict. I think I don't speak for the Israeli government. I can only tell you and echo what they've said publicly, and that is that if they feel threatened by Hezbollah, they will take actions in their defense against them.
The IDF says it killed 2 Palestinian terror operatives who crossed the Gaza ceasefire line. The operatives approached reservists of the Jerusalem Brigade in a way the military said posed an immediate threat. The Israeli Air Force then struck and eliminated the terrorists. Separately, the army released footage showing the demolition of Hamas tunnels on the Israeli side of the Yellow Line in the Khan Yunis area. Meanwhile, mediators of the fragile Gaza ceasefire expressed support for U.S. President Donald Trump's peace plan, though sources said little progress was made in recent meetings beyond the current truce. A joint statement by the U.S., Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey contained no new announcements, but urged Israel and Hamas to show restraint and avoid a return to war. The mediators called for the swift establishment of a board of peace and a technocratic government to manage post-war Gaza, while sources said moving to phase 2 will require compromises on IDF withdrawal and Hamas disarmament. That's all for this edition of the ILTV on the Hour. Thanks for watching.
Your dream apartment in the holiest city in the world is just a click away. Am Yisrael Chai, the lifeline for so many chesed operations in Israel, is holding their annual Dream Raffle, where 1 ticket only can buy you a luxurious apartment in the heart of Jerusalem. Don't win the apartment? No problem! All raffle proceeds from all tickets go directly to one of the incredible organizations that Am Yisrael Chai supports. And for the first time ever, the apartment is fully furnished. Don't miss this incredible opportunity to actively donate to Israel's functionality and, on the way, potentially score big and win the apartment of a lifetime. Scan the QR code now to join.
Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Madar Gavelazi, and coming up in today's newscast. Israel and Egypt finalize a gas deal worth billions of dollars. Not only Egypt, Germany doubles its billion-dollar investment in Israel's Arrow 3. And the youngest victim of the Bondi Beach massacre, 10-year-old Matilda, is laid to rest. IDF fighter jets and precision strikes hit Hezbollah terror infrastructure throughout Lebanon today, including rocket and artillery launch sites, weapons depots, and a military training compound. According to the IDF, some of the targets were deep inside Lebanon and had been used recently by Hezbollah in a direct violation of the ceasefire agreement. The military said the training camp was used to prepare terror operatives for attacks against IDF forces and Israeli civilians, including live fire drills and weapons training. Minutes after the initial wave of strikes, the IDF carried out a follow-up attack in southern Lebanon, eliminating a Hezbollah terrorist operative. The IDF stressed that the Lebanese government has failed to disarm Hezbollah as required under the ceasefire, allowing the terror group to rebuild its capabilities. And in Australia, today, police arrested numerous suspects on their way to Bondi Beach after intelligence reports they intended to carry out a violent act. This follows Sunday's massacre at Bondi Beach, which left 16 people dead and dozens injured. Dramatic footage shows the moments of the arrests. Police have said that as of now, they are not connecting this most recent incident to Sunday's attack. And meanwhile, another victim of the deadly Bondi Beach Hanukkah attack has been identified today as Adam Smith, a 50-year-old father of 4. Smith was not Jewish and was not at Bondi Beach to attend the candle lighting event. He was walking with his wife along the beach when he was shot and killed during the attack on the Jewish holiday gathering. Mourners in Sydney today laid to rest 10-year-old Matilda, the youngest victim of the deadly beach shooting, as anger and grief turned into sharp criticism of Australia's government. Hundreds gathered at the Chevra Kadisha Memorial Hall, with lines of mourners stretching far down the street. Survivors said Jewish communities have been left unprotected as hatred grew since the start of the war in Gaza. The attack, carried out by alleged father and son gunmen during a Hanukkah celebration, is believed to have been inspired by Islamic State, shocking Australia and deepening fears for Jewish safety worldwide. Some blamed Prime Minister Anthony Albanese for failing to stop a surge in anti-Semitism, saying the attack could have been avoided.
These actions do not protect the Jewish people. We are a minority. We are contributed. I'm not Australian. I am Australian. I immigrated here 17 years ago from South Africa to come to a safer, better place. I talked to my family back home. They actually cannot believe what's happened on Australian soil.
I just feel like, why didn't you listen? Why haven't you listened to us? We've been saying it. Every time I see a pro-Palestinian flag, I get terrified because I know what that really means. You're not listening. Globalize this. This is globalized the Intifada, burying a 10-year-old child. She wasn't religious. She's not a rabbi. She's very secular.
Seriously, like, it's unfathomable, you know? It's like your heart's been ripped out. It's terrible, you know? I mean, no one wants this, okay? It's a feeling, it could have been avoided. This whole thing could have been avoided, you know? I mean, anti-Semitism has now been brewing in Australia for over 2 years. Anthony Albanese kept pushing it under the carpet, okay? They keep letting people into this country who don't want to assimilate with Australian values.
And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced a landmark natural gas agreement with Egypt, the largest gas deal in Israel's history, worth an estimated 112 billion shekels. There is rising speculation that the announcement will lead to a summit between Netanyahu and Egyptian President al-Sisi. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
According to the Prime Minister, 58 billion shekels, more than half the total value of the mega gas deal, are expected to flow directly into Israel's state treasury, funding national priorities and strengthening Israel's economic resilience.
שלום לכם, אזרחי ישראל היקרים. היום אישרתי את עסקת הגז הגדולה בתולדות ישראל. היקף העסקה עומד על 112 מיליארד שקלים.
Under the agreement, Israel will receive 500 million shekels in the first 4 years alone, while companies commit to major investments in energy infrastructure, including a significant expansion of gas pipeline capacity. Netanyahu said the deal, signed with energy giant Chevron, will generate massive long-term revenue for Israel and cement the country's status as a regional energy powerhouse. Netanyahu said that in the first 4 years alone, the state will receive about 500 million shekels a year, with revenue expected to climb to around 6 billion shekels annually by the early 2030s. The Prime Minister described the agreement as a strategic breakthrough, strengthening Israel's economy, deepening ties with Egypt, and reinforcing Israel's position as a key energy supplier in the region. The deal had stalled earlier this year after concerns were raised about domestic gas prices and long-term energy security. The deal followed heavy diplomatic pressure from Washington, which sees the agreement as a key step in stabilizing Israel-Egypt relations after 2 years of strain amid the Gaza war. U.S. officials view the gas deal as a foundation for broader regional cooperation and even a potential summit between Netanyahu and Egyptian President el-Sisi. Netanyahu ended his announcement with a Hanukkah message saying Israel has brought another jug of oil to the nation, one that will power the country's economy and security for years to come.
And in another mega deal, Germany has now doubled down on the Israeli Arrow air defense system by announcing it has now approved a $3.1 billion expansion of the agreement, announced just days ago. The expanded agreement will significantly increase production of Arrow 3 interceptors and launchers for Germany, enhancing its ability to defend against long-range ballistic missiles, including threats posed by Iran and by Russia's growing use of missile and drone capabilities in Europe. Earlier this month, Israel completed delivery of the Arrow 3 system to Germany under a separate $3.5 billion deal signed 2 years ago. That delivery marked the first time Israel's most advanced missile system defense was deployed by a European NATO power. Israeli and German defense officials formally signed the expanded contract today in Germany. In total, the Arrow agreements between Israel and Germany are now valued at around $6.5 billion, making this the largest defense export deal in Israel's history. And joining us now with more on these mega billion-dollar deals is David Makovsky, a senior fellow of the Washington Institute for Near East Policy and director of the Koret Project on Arab-Israel relations. Thank you so much for joining us.
Delighted to be with you.
So there have been a lot of tensions between Israel and Egypt these past 2 years, mainly over Gaza. But now we see a 112 billion shekel gas deal. I mean, what is the significance of this mega deal?
Look, I think it's important, given that, as the Prime Minister said, that Israel is becoming an exporter of natural gas, the way it is also with Jordan. This is a way of, I think, really deepening the relationship, which has been somewhat bifurcated, where Israel has got great relations in Egypt and Jordan with the security establishment, but the political relations are not good. So I think this is important to get this done. It's clear that President Trump wanted this, and I think it was smart of the Prime Minister to say, I want this deal announced before he goes to Mar-a-Lago at the end of the month. I see it very much connected.
And so there are critics saying that this deal has been finalized pretty much solely due to American pressure on Israel as a prerequisite to this meeting between Netanyahu and Trump, and perhaps with Sisi in Washington, meeting that President Trump wants to advance. I mean, what's your view on this?
With the Sisi angle is interesting. I mean, the Prime Minister is not on speaking relations, either with the President of Egypt, Sisi, or with King Abdullah of Jordan. These are two sets of relationships at the top that are critical. If the more moderate forces in the Middle East are to work together, they have to be able to talk together. There was maybe a 5-second phone call on the day that the hostages were released because it looked like the prime minister might go there to Sharm el-Sheikh, but it didn't end up happening. So I think it's important. I know that people here wonder, with all this AI, issues of artificial intelligence, does Israel have enough energy, enough electricity? I think Israel's thinking in many very creative directions about that. And I think there's some good ideas that are out there, and I think they're going to be discussed in Mar-a-Lago as well.
And how does this deal affect, let's say, the wider region and Israel's role as a dominant player in the region?
Look, I think it's important that Israel's enemies understand that for all the maybe personal tensions between President Sisi and Prime Minister Netanyahu, that there's a convergence of common interests. Energy is everything. You can't do things in the Middle East or in any country without energy. So if Iran or some of these others, say, hey, well, Sisi and Bibi don't exactly get along, you might say, yeah, they don't get along, but Israel just signed a $34 billion natural gas deal with Egypt. I mean, I think that talks louder than anything else. So I think this is a big plus for Israel, in terms of how it projects its power in the Middle East in general, and especially with the destabilizing forces like the Iranians.
And, not just in the Middle East, but in Europe as well. I mean, we're seeing today that Germany has doubled its investment in Israel's Arrow 3. I mean, what can you tell us about the significance of this as well, especially at a time of increased anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism, and where governments have sought to boycott Israel, issue arms embargoes against Israel? I mean, what's the significance of this?
Look, I think it's critical. I'm glad you raised that, because I think the Germany case was important, because for a while during the war, there was this boycott going on. And I think people want to say the war's over. Israel is helping Germany with the defense of Europe, dealing with the fear of Russia, how it comes out of this war with Ukraine. And the more that Israel is viewed, I think, as an arms supplier to its closest friends, then I think that's crucial in terms of rehabilitating its regional standing. So I'm glad you raised the Germany case, because I think that's a perfect example of hopefully the worst in German-Israeli tension is behind us, and that now it's returning to where it was before. And it's very important to Europe. And we saw the Arrow 3 works, and Germany cares a lot. They've I think doubled their defense budget since the war in Ukraine. And the fact that they reached out to Israel is that they're saying, we think Israel has got a lot of value added in terms of missile defense.
Absolutely. A lot of value added from Israel. David Makovsky, thank you so much for joining us today.
Delighted to be with you anytime. Thank you.
And moving on, Israel is pushing back against an upcoming UN-backed famine report on Gaza, saying it ignores key data from Israeli and American aid coordinators. We hear more from ILTV's Devo Klein.
The Defense Ministry's Kogat says the IPC Famine Monitor did not seek input from Israel or the U.S.-led Civil Military Coordination Center ahead of the report's release. According to official Israeli data, since the ceasefire began, between 600 and 800 trucks of humanitarian goods entered Gaza every single day. More than 25,000 food trucks have entered the Strip, delivering over 500,000 tons of food. That's around 70% of all aid provided. Israel stresses that only about 20% of this aid was delivered by the United Nations. The vast majority was sent by foreign governments, international organizations, and the private sector, with Israel facilitating every single shipment. In addition, 6,700 tons of medical supplies have entered Gaza, along with nearly 310,000 tents and tarpaulins. More than 1,800 trucks of winter clothing and blankets have been delivered, together with over 26,000 tons of hygiene products. Just in the past week, more than 300 trucks of flour entered the enclave. Israel says these deliveries amount to more than 5 times Gaza's internationally defined nutritional requirements, based on World Food Program standards, figures previously cited by the IPC itself. Data from the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics shows food prices in Gaza have dropped by around 80% since the summer, a development Israel says directly reflects the massive increase in supplies. Israel notes that previous IPC warnings of imminent famine, including claims that famine had already begun, were later shown to be inaccurate, even by the IPC's own data. Yet those reports have been cited in international courts and used to accuse Israel of deliberately starving Gazans. Israel says it will continue to facilitate humanitarian aid at unprecedented levels, but warns that reports issued without full coordination, verified data, or ground reality risk becoming political documents rather than professional assessments.
And as Hanukkah shines a light on Jewish sovereignty and resilience, Regavim is warning of a quieter battle unfolding across Israel's heartland. Recent studies reveal how illegal construction and infrastructure are reshaping reality on the ground and threatening Israel's control over key areas, including Jerusalem. Let's take a look.
Regavim calls it a silent takeover, not marked by dramatic confrontations, but by steady, illegal construction that is changing facts on the ground and weakening Israel's sovereignty. The organization applies its methods across Israel and has helped shape national policy in the Negev and the Galilee. But as Hanukkah shines a light on the roots of Jewish sovereignty, this report focuses on the biblical heartland, Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria, the places most closely tied to the Hashmonaim struggle. For example, a Regavim study presented last month to the Knesset Interior and Environment Committee focused on Jerusalem and revealed a striking imbalance. Since 1999, more than 2,500 illegal structures have been built in open areas of eastern Jerusalem, compared to just 68 in the west. In total, the city has lost more than 3,500 dunams of open land, designated initially as green spaces and future development reserves. The data is based on GIS mapping, aerial imagery, and extensive fieldwork. According to the study, nearly all illegal construction in open areas occurs in eastern Jerusalem, yet enforcement remains uneven. Moreover, years of neglect have allowed illegal building to spread unchecked, damaging natural landscapes, heritage sites, and creating serious urban blight and security threats. The study also challenges the claim that illegal construction is driven by overcrowding. Regavim found that several neighborhoods with high rates of illicit building have some of the lowest population densities in the world. Regavim says illegal construction is a national challenge and is warned that it is being used as a political tool to alter Israel's character and control over land. The Jerusalem findings fit into a much broader picture. For example, for more than a decade, Regavim has documented a coordinated Palestinian Authority effort to seize control of Area C through illegal construction, agriculture, and infrastructure. Despite the fact that international law recognizes Israel's full jurisdiction in Area C, international actors have spent hundreds of millions of dollars and euros to support this illegal activity. Central to the Palestinian Authority's strategy of quiet annexation is a vast network of unauthorized roads. Regavim's research shows that illegal road construction in Area C has nearly doubled over the past 15 years, enabling further land grabs and posing serious security risks. Regavim says the consequences are clear. Each illegal road and structure erodes Israeli sovereignty and narrows the window for effective action. This Hanukkah, the lesson is the same as it was 2,000 years ago. Sovereignty is not preserved by words alone. It must be defended on the ground, in real time, and before it's lost.
And Mossad Director David Barnea says Israel has a clear and ongoing duty to ensure Tehran can never again move towards a nuclear bomb. Speaking at a Mossad Awards ceremony in Jerusalem, Barnea said Iran, a regime openly sworn to Israel's destruction, will rush to build a nuclear weapon as soon as it's allowed. Barnea said Iran's uranium enrichment levels have no civilian explanation and prove the regime's military intent. He stressed that Israel, in close cooperation with the United States, must ensure Iran's nuclear project, severely damaged in the recent war, is never reactivated. That warning comes as new details emerge about one of Israel's most sensitive operations. A joint Washington Post and PBS Frontline investigation reveals that during Operation Rising Lion, Israel eliminated 11 senior Iranian nuclear scientists, including former atomic energy chief Feridun Abbasi. The operation, based on years of intelligence, agents inside Iran, and coordination with the United States, is assessed to have set Iran's nuclear program back by several years. This January, the Israeli-American Council National Summit returns to Florida, bringing thousands together for the nation's largest pro-Israel gathering. The three-day event will feature leaders and public figures, including former IDF spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, Dr. Miriam Adelson, Caitlyn Jenner, former hostages Sagi Dekelchen, Keith Siegel, and Omer Venkert. Taking place January 15th through the 17th, the summit underscores a critical moment for the pro-Israel community. And so joining us now is Tal Schuster, co-chair of the Israeli-American Council, with a look at why this summit matters. Tal, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. So this year we're doing the largest summit outside of Israel with major Israeli American, Jewish American, and anyone who loves Israel. This conference is open to anyone who has the unconditional love to the state of Israel. It's especially today when our community is concerned. That's the time to show our voice, a strong community coast to coast, and be there in Florida, January 15 to the 17th. It's the time to meet major voices around us from politicians to business to social network and many others.
So this is a three-day event in Florida, and you mentioned some of the speakers, some of the highlights, speakers, programs, experiences. I mean, what really is going to make this summit so unique?
So there are many summits around us, but this one is one-of-a-kind experience. You have major voices around you, from returned hostages, major voices like Miriam Adelson, business representatives who are coming differently from education track to the business to tech and to medicine. You have members of Congress and state leaders who will be around us. It's 3 days, nonstop, super professional during the day, and amazing during the night. You'll hear even amazing Israeli stars such as Dan Reichel and Ivri Lider. We have comedy representatives. We have unbelievable stars coming there. So it's super professional, interesting. You can learn so much. Remember that you are in a very strong community. You are not alone. You're surrounded by coast to coast, strong community of Israeli, American, Jewish, and anyone who loves Israel. And at the same time, have the best time. It's also great for the young professional that we have a special track for them. They are welcome as well. They have unbelievable programs waiting for them in Miami on January.
It really is a very unique summit. And so for people watching, our viewers who may be interested in attending this January, I mean, who should come, first of all? And if they want to, I mean, how can they get tickets?
So first of all, it's open to anyone. Again, anyone who loves Israel and want to support Israel. We're even going to have a major expo of different real estate companies that are coming from Israel, and that's exciting also this year. Now, they need to do is go to the website iacsummit.org and register. We are there waiting for you. It's a great place for anyone who loves Israel, for families, young professionals who have special events for them, students, many young people, and even students that are not just students, even the high school student that we have a special program for them. You will come to the best summit with most energy.
Absolutely, and I know we're just showing visuals. President Trump was a speaker previously, so it's really an incredible event. Tal Schuster, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected around the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 8 degrees Celsius or 47 degrees Fahrenheit. Tomorrow, we should be seeing sunny skies alongside cool temperatures with highs of 17 degrees Celsius or 62 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels and keep up with us on social media. That's at ILTV_Israel on all platforms. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Ladar Gravelazi. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.
No one put money on my gold medal in Paris. They didn't bet on that. But I knew that morning that's the only thing I can do. If you will watch the video of me winning that medal, singing the anthem, I couldn't stop crying.
Hello, and welcome back to the ILTV podcast. I'm Ayan Hoffman, executive editor of ILTV. And as always, we're so happy to welcome our viewers and our listeners. Now, today we have a very, very special guest, Moran Samuel. She's not just a Paralympic gold medalist. She is a woman who has rebuilt her life, identity, and sense of purpose through sport, and who continues to use her voice to expand what strength, family, and leadership can look like in Israel and beyond. Welcome, Moran.
Thank you. I'm really excited to meet you personally, first of all.
You as well. It's such a pleasure and such an honor to have you here. Now, many people, of course, know you as the athlete that you are, the champion, the gold medalist, but fewer people actually know how this all got started. Take me to the moment when everything changed for you and what you were afraid you might lose. How did this happen?
So if you have met me when I was a young person and opened up my chest, you wouldn't find an anatomical heart. Mine was round and orange, and it was bouncing up and down my chest because I was a basketball player, a really good one actually, representing Israel in the youth national teams and coaching basketball. That was my life and my dream. And when I was 24 years old, I suffered a really rare condition called spinal stroke. It's like a ticking bomb in your body. You do not know it exists. It exploded. I had no oxygen supply to my spinal cord. And just like that, I became paralyzed in the lower part of my body. And at the time, I'm not just a professional basketball player. I'm already a student taking my bachelor degree in physiotherapy, which was, it couldn't be more ironic than that. So that's a point where everything changed. And I found myself lying in bed, completely paralyzed, thinking and believing life is over.
Wow. So how were you able to go from that moment lying in bed and thinking it's over to where you are today? What changed in your head to be able to grab and go forward to the future?
So I think that lying in bed, especially at the beginning, realizing I cannot move my body and I'm dependent on everybody else to do the smallest things in life, the things that after that you appreciate much more, like going to the toilet even. And I realized that the real arena where everything happens, everything happens inside our brain. It's not our body, first of all. So realizing that was really important. And the real fight is fighting over that feeling that life is over and realizing life as I knew it might be over, but I'm still here. And making small, first of all, mental wins where you say, okay, this is not what I expected. Life has changed dramatically, but I'm still here. And I have things that I want to do in my life. And if I want to live a meaningful life, I have to get out of bed, literally and mentally. Just get out of it, and get over it. But it's small wins. It's all those moments where everything you want to do is give up and you didn't, and you meet that in life, even in ordinary life. Like everybody meets difficult times and challenges. Even not thinking about the last few days here in Israel or in the world or the last 2 years, we all face moments where all we want to do is say, okay, I cannot do it. And those are the most important moments in life, because this is where you have to find your resilience, your inner strength, believe that you can do it. And that's actually like sport. You have to train yourself to do that.
100%. Now, you started rehabilitation, I'm assuming maybe to think about doing something with basketball, but that's obviously not where you went. Where did you decide to shift what you were doing in rehabilitation and aim toward the sport and toward what you ended up ultimately achieving?
So I couldn't completely stay out of the basketball court because I went back playing wheelchair basketball. I actually finished my bachelor in physiotherapy and did a master in child development, started working with infant and children with disabilities. And that was the first shift I did. But I wanted more. And the athlete in me and the way I capture myself was always through sport. That was my identity. Losing my body was kind of losing that. So going back to sport, but not just to have fun and play, but to win, to get to the highest level, to elite level, was getting to the Paralympic Games. And it couldn't happen in team sport. I needed to find a sport where I can do it by myself, be dependent only on me.
Only on the brain and the
And
positive
the brain
thinking.
and the positive and the strength. And that's how I end up in rowing, para rowing. Started rowing in the Ercon, the small Ercon River, aiming to be the best in the world, which I did.
Wow, you're actually considered best in the world in the Paralympics.
Yeah, I won the gold medal in the Paralympic
That's true.
Games.
So I guess that makes you best in the world. That's
I
right.
was
I'm asking
the
you
world
the
champion in 2015.
That's right.
Yeah, there are many, many great athletes in my sport, and we compete around the medal table. But yeah.
Amazing. You're not competing now, are you?
No, I've decided to retire. Paris was the last Paralympic, the fourth and the last Paralympic Games for me. And, you know, the reality in Israel was impossible. And the day of my final was a very, very hard day. I woke up that morning knowing it's the last time I'm going to compete in the biggest event of sport because I'm going to retire. And I was training for the games with 3 little children under missiles attacks and war and hostages. So you had to kind of try and put it aside just to concentrate on what you need to do. But that morning I woke up, it was September 1st, and the news were all about the 6 hostages that were murdered in Gaza, and they were brought back to Israel. So I woke up that morning to those news, and I said, how can I separate it? You know, they want you to focus, but how can I focus? And I realized the only thing I can do is transfer pain into power. And that morning I said, I cannot. It's going to go with me in the boat. So I'm going to use it. I'm going to use it to show the world that we are here to stay, that nothing will stop us. And I knew that the only thing I can give my country that day, even though I was not, let's say no one put money on my gold medal in Paris, okay? They didn't bet on that. But I knew that morning that's the only thing I can do. Cross the finish line first, sing the anthem, raise the flag, and that's what I did that morning. And if you will watch the video of me winning that medal, singing the anthem, I couldn't stop crying.
Yeah, gosh, give me chills thinking about it. Such an important day for the state of Israel, for yourself, of course, first and foremost, but for the state of Israel.
Yeah, that was for the state of Israel that day. Yeah.
How old are your kids?
So 10, almost 10, almost 8, and really a few days from getting 4 years old.
Oh my goodness, wow.
Yeah.
And training for all of this with little kids, with the war going on.
Each one of them actually, I think, gave me the motivation to win the next medal. And I have participated 4 times in the games, and I have 3 medals in 3 different colors. So bronze for my first child, silver for the second one, and then I knew I cannot have another child but not win another medal because, you know, they fight over cereal. So, she got more than I did. So I had to win another medal.
Oh, my goodness. And you have to get the gold. Now, don't they fight over the fact that you got the bronze versus the gold? I don't know.
I don't know. We haven't got there yet. Now they are really happy, to just know that they were part of my journey. And each one of them symbolized different path to the Paralympic Games, but we don't have time now to talk about it. So people will need to come and hear me speak and tell my story, but because I give my talk and around Israel. But it's an amazing journey.
So, you've talked a lot about how sport is really your lifeline. So tell me what that means, that sports keep you alive.
First of all, sport is always a way to get your self-confidence higher, to believe in your abilities, to get better all the time. It doesn't matter how old you are, what you do in your life. Once you start playing sport, any kind of sport, running outside, playing with your friends, playing basketball, it doesn't matter. It's just every time you do it, you feel better. You feel better about your body, you feel better with your mind, and it's something you give yourself. It's like this amazing present that you give your body and your soul. So that's sport. Now, when you're a person with a disability, when all the focus is about what your body cannot do, playing sport is like the best cure of the way you capture yourself, the way you look at yourself in the mirror, the way you feel about your body. Because you look around and, okay, we are 10, 15% of people around the world are people with disability. When you are that person, it's 100%. This is who you are. That's your family around you. So you have to build your ability to look on what you can do. And that's the language sport speaks. What you can do. Sport doesn't care about your disability. I'm now working with new soldiers that got injured, and we are building projects to get them into sport. And once they are there, they don't care anymore, because now they can look on what they can do. And that's what sports give you.
Incredible. And I do want to jump back for just a moment because you mentioned about the anthem playing during the war. But I remember, and I'd written down that there was a period where you went and won a medal and they didn't sing the national anthem and you had to sing it yourself. That was in Italy, I think, right?
Yes.
Tell us that story.
It was the first gold medal I ever won in international competition. Okay. I was so excited, crossing the finish line first, getting to the podium, getting my medal. And there on the podium, they start playing the national anthem, which was not Hatikva. So I'm there on the podium and I realize I don't recognize the music, right? So it took me about 20 seconds to kind of, okay, you have to stop. It's not the national anthem of Israel. And they say, yeah, it is. And I say, no, please look it up on YouTube. And they say, it is from YouTube. So what, I'm there. I was embarrassed, but, I could go back home winning a gold medal, but feeling so bad about the experience. And I said, I will reverse from that. I believe that if you look at an obstacle as an obstacle, it will knock you down. But if mentally you look at an obstacle as a challenge, it will be an opportunity for something even better and bigger. And I'm there thinking, how can I make this better and bigger? I asked for the microphone and I just sang Hatikva a cappella myself. And people who do not understand a word in Hebrew, there was a queue of people wanting to shake my hand, crying. And it became bigger and better.
You are such an inspiration, and I would love to take how you managed to balance being this icon, this national and international inspiration, a mother, living through a war, you're racing to the shelter with your kids, you're training. How do you keep this up, and how do you maintain faith all the time?
You have ups and downs like everybody else, and I'm human. Maybe when I was younger, I wanted to believe that I'm a superhero, but I'm not. And acknowledging that is also very, very important. Knowing not just when to push as hard as you can, but also when to stop and take a big breath and give your children a hug and just feel that not everything is pressing you and pushing you, that you control it. So it's all about where you put your control. When you are an athlete in this highest level, or when you're even, working, you have a startup, okay, and you aim as high as possible, and you've been doing so much work in your area and, getting to the highest level of what you do. But I think that when you are motivated from the journey itself and not just what color of medal will I win and how far will I get, then you are focused on what you can control. Yeah. And that's true, and that's balancing you. And actually, being a mother and an athlete just grounds you, because you always go back to the best distraction ever, your children. And it keeps you focused on what's really important in life. It gives everything a really good perspective. And I think that what really helped me is that everything was a choice. Yeah. Being a parent and an athlete was a choice. If I had to choose either one of them, I would choose my family. So the fact that I could do both, it was not doing this or that, but also being able to be the mother I want to be and doing everything out of love helped me do it easier. Because being a parent is the hardest work you'll ever do in your life.
I can agree
but
with
it's
that.
Also the easiest one. So it's a dissonance. How could it be like the hardest thing you do, but also the easiest? Because you put love in it. And that's what makes it easier.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Your children are so lucky.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I feel
100%.
lucky.
So now you
And I didn't do it alone. My partner. We should really emphasize that it's impossible when you don't have the right support. And Limor is just amazing. She comes from support for people with disabilities. This is what she do all her life. So yeah, she's the best support ever.
Amazing, amazing. Now, you surprised a lot of people when you showed up on Dancing with the Stars. I mean, you already were this medalist. You're super successful. Like, why put your body onto Dancing with the Stars and do this now?
First of all, because you always regret the things you do not do. And as a basketball player, I know that I will miss 100% of the shots I don't take. So for me, it was an opportunity to try something new I haven't tried before, and also get visibility on prime time. I mean, I got inside so many living rooms in Israel that do not follow sport. And, when you try to, so we have Olympic sport, we have soccer, right? Football, then some basketball, and then we have Olympic sport. But Paralympic sport still is not rated as high as we wanted to.
Even though, isn't Israel like #1 in the world for Paralympic sport?
We're not #1 in the world, but we are leading when you look at population size and how many medals we win. Also in Olympic sport, not just Paralympic.
Really?
Yeah, we are amazing. We are an amazing country.
It's amazing to hear that about Jewish population.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I grew up in America where everyone said Jews don't choose sports.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, we're too small, right?
Yeah.
We don't have the right genetics.
That's right.
That's not right.
Apparently not.
The joke about Olympic sport is that we only win sport that we don't have to wear shoes. So it's judo and sailing and taekwondo and yeah.
So funny. That's true, though.
Yeah,
That's
it's
really
true.
interesting. Is it the same in Paralympics? Do we see the same thing?
Yeah, we see swimming and rowing and yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah,
good takeaway.
Even though I wear shoes, I don't really use them.
Of course, no, that makes sense. That's so funny. So so tell me also, you mentioned about
Dancing with the Star was this amazing opportunity to get inside your house and your living room, and people seeing a person in a wheelchair just having fun and dancing and showing abilities. Again, sometimes when we think about people with disabilities, we think about all the things they cannot do. And then you see sport, then you see people dancing and on prime time, and they listen to your story. And I think they realize two things. First of all, that again, we all have disabilities, not all recognized by the government or getting money for, or but we all deal with something. It's something we share. So it's not about what your challenge is how much strength you believe you have inside. And I believe people have this amazing superpower, the ability not to give up. And if the last 2 years taught us something, is that this ability is the most important one in life. And when you speak to hostages, they came back, or soldiers who just got out of battle, it's about not giving up.
Yeah, and I think it's so true, especially even with the Jewish soul. We joke about Jews and sports, but when you talk about Jews and resilience, there's no question that there is an unbelievable resilience among the Jewish people, the Israeli people, even more so.
Through generations.
Yeah, it's really incredible. It's funny because I have 5 kids, and one of my high schoolers always gets angry at me because she says that I tell her too many times, no, it's in your head. Focus. You can do it if you just want to. She says, not everything can be done because you believe in it.
First of all, she's right. She's right. Not everything is possible.
Yeah.
It's true. We are not going to make all our dreams come true.
Yes.
But if we put the effort in learning how young people think they need to compare themselves, also adults, to others. And that's the problem. When you believe in yourself, you believe you will do the best you can do without comparing yourself to what other people can do. And that inner voice inside of us is the most important voice. And also as a parent, letting your children know you believe in them, so that will become their inner voice, is so important. But also it's important to understand how important it is to measure yourself compared to yourself. And that's what I did as an athlete. I never looked at my competitors saying, I want to be better than this or that one. Every day I woke up, I got into my boat and I said, today I want to be better than what I was yesterday. That's it.
Amazing. So we're going to run out of time, but I do want to ask you about what you're doing today. You recently joined the board of Beit Izzy Shapiro. I'm wondering what drew you personally to their work, and why did you feel that now was the right moment to do that?
So my partner actually worked in Beit Izzy Shapiro many, many years ago, like 20 years ago, as a hydrotherapist. And that was the first time of me getting inside as a person with a disability and looking at the work they did. I was inspired by the children, by the caregivers there, by what they do. And now, 20 years later, when I'm out of sport, I want to do as best as I can to help this organization like Izzy Shapiro, grow. And they have programs that inspired me as a person. You know that in September, they opened a kindergarten. It's like where everybody come together, young children 0 to 3 with disabilities and without disabilities, entering the same building on September 1st. That's how young we should start, and that's what Izzy Shapiro is doing. They have this amazing project, Tech for Heroes, where soldiers that are struggling to go back to their life, get help, technological help, whatever they need to make their surroundings. Sometimes you have a disability, but what really bounds you or makes it impossible for you to rehabilitate is the environment. It's not your motivation. So they are taking this out of the equation. They say, okay, what you need, we will make it happen. So leadership, and we don't have enough time to speak about what all they do, but we share the same core values. It's about looking on the abilities rather than on disabilities.
Yeah, I mean, I know that their language is from limitation to capability.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a really incredible statement and really reflects, I think, everything that you've said throughout this whole conversation.
Yeah,
Amazing.
we speak the same language, and I'm really proud being part of this organization, and I'm still learning because they do so much. I need more time.
Yeah.
But eventually, they affect people's life, and not just people with disabilities, because it's their families and the neighborhood they're in. And
the truth is, it's all of society, because I think one of the problems is people, as you said, they see someone with a wheelchair, they think, oh, they have a disability. They don't think about all of their abilities. And the society really needs to understand how we can work more together.
And in order to do that, we need to be together. And what Izzy Shapiro is doing is getting everybody together in their leadership programs, in the kindergarten, in the school environment, everywhere around. It's about being together. It's not about I can help people with disabilities. No, we do it together.
We're going to finish now, and I want to ask you a last question that really can leave people with something to think about, okay? So when people meet someone with a disability, what do you most wish they would stop assuming? And on the flip side, what would you like them to think instead?
So first of all, I would like people to stop assuming we need help. So if you have a question about whether I need help or not, ask first. Don't assume it, because we want to do as much as we can by ourselves. Be independent, control our lives, and that's the first thing. Don't assume we need help. If you think we might need help, please ask us first. In general, it respects me as a person, okay? And make sure, no matter where you are or what you do in the world, that your door is open for everybody in the same way.
Amazing message.
The door of your house, the door of your building, the door of your heart, the door of your business. Make sure it is open for everybody. We have so many people that their disability is completely transparent. So you cannot put a ramp to help them. But when you open your heart is accessible, it's enough.
What an amazing message to leave on. Moran Samuel, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
This January, the Israeli-American Council National Summit returns to Florida, bringing thousands together for the nation's largest pro-Israel gathering. The three-day event will feature leaders and public figures, including former IDF spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, Dr. Miriam Adelson, Caitlyn Jenner, former hostages Sagi Dekel-Khan, Keith Siegel, and Omer Venkert. Taking place January 15th through the 17th, the summit underscores a critical moment for the pro-Israel community. And so joining us now is Tal Schuster, co-chair of the Israeli-American Council, with a look at why this summit matters. Tal, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. So this year we're doing the largest summit outside of Israel with major Israeli American, Jewish American, and anyone who loves Israel. This conference is open to anyone who has the unconditional love to the state of Israel. It's especially today when our community is concerned. That's the time to show our voice, a strong community coast to coast, and be there in Florida, January 15 to the 17th. It's the time to meet major voices around us from politicians to business to social network and many others.
So this is a three-day event in Florida, and you mentioned some of the speakers, some of the highlights, speakers, programs, experiences. I mean, what really is going to make this summit so unique?
So there are many summits around us, but this one is one-of-a-kind experience. You have major voices around you, from returned hostages, major voices like Miriam Edelson, business representatives who are coming differently from education track to the business to tech and to medicine. You have members of Congress and state leaders who will be around us. It's 3 days, nonstop, super professional during the day, and amazing during the night. You'll hear even amazing Israeli stars such as Dan Reichel and Ivri Lider. We have comedy representatives. We have unbelievable stars coming there. So it's super professional, interesting. You can learn so much. Remember that you are in a very strong community. You are not alone. You're surrounded by coast to coast, strong community of Israeli, American, Jewish, and anyone who loves Israel. And at the same time, have the best time. It's also great for the young professional that we have a special track for them. They are welcome as well. They have unbelievable programs waiting for them in Miami on January.
It really is a very unique summit. And so for people watching, our viewers who may be interested in attending this January, I mean, who should come, first of all? And if they want to, I mean, how can they get tickets?
So first of all, it's open to anyone. Again, anyone who loves Israel and want to support Israel. We're even going to have a major expo of different real estate companies that are coming from Israel, and that's exciting also this year. Now, they need to do is go to the website iacsummit.org and register. We are there waiting for you. It's a great place for anyone who loves Israel, for families, young professionals who have special events for them, students, many young people, and even students that are not just students, even the high school student that we have a special program for them. You will come to the best summit with most energy.
Absolutely, and I know we're just showing visuals. President Trump was a speaker previously, so it's really an incredible event. Tal Schuster, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to seeing you there.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Alec Pollard, coming to you live from Israel with the biggest stories in the region. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will reportedly present U.S. President Donald Trump with new plans for a potential strike on Iran when he visits the president at Mar-a-Lago at the end of the month. Jerusalem is deeply concerned that Tehran is not only rebuilding its nuclear program, damaged in the June war, but also ramping up ballistic missile production, potentially 3,000 per month if left unchecked. Israel sees the missiles as an immediate threat, fearing they could deter Israeli action against Iran or its regional proxies. In response to the reports, White House spokesperson Anna Kelly told reporters, as President Trump has said, if Iran pursued a nuclear weapon, that site would be attacked. and would be wiped out before they even got close. According to Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam, the first phase of a plan to disarm Hezbollah south of the Litani River will be completed within a few days. The claim is being met with deep skepticism in Jerusalem and doubts from Washington. Israeli officials have repeatedly warned that similar promises in the past were never fully implemented, and that Hezbollah has a long record of hiding weapons, redeploying fighters, and operating underground despite international agreements. This comes amid growing concerns of a renewed conflict between Israel and the Iran-backed terror group. Israel insists any disarmament must be verifiable, irreversible, and enforced on the ground, not just declared by Beirut. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio struck a cautious tone, stopping short of expressing confidence that Hezbollah will actually be disarmed.
And we have tried to, in a cooperative way, to do everything we can to empower the Lebanese government to have the ability to do that. And so I hope that's what these talks are aimed towards, and we'll be supportive in every way we can to achieve that outcome. What I think is abundantly clear to everybody is no one is in favor of a Hezbollah that can once again threaten the region, act as a direct Iranian proxy, and obviously if they threaten Israel, we're not going to have peace. So we are hopeful that the talks between Lebanese authorities and the Israelis will create outlines and a way forward that prevents further conflict. I think I don't speak for the Israeli government. I can only tell you and echo what they've said publicly, and that is that if they feel threatened by Hezbollah, they will take actions in their defense against them.
Amid the alarming reports of Hamas's rebuilding of capabilities in the Gaza Strip, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met today with U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham in his office in Jerusalem. Senator Graham did not spare criticism of the reality on the ground and presented a gloomy picture of Hamas and Hezbollah's rebuilding attempts, saying, "We had a lot of achievements in 2025, and I want to make sure that 2026 will be a year of peace and of beating the bad guy." Hamas is not disarming, but rather rearming and trying to establish its rule in Gaza. This is an outcome that we simply cannot accept. Regarding the north, Graham said Hezbollah is also trying to produce more weapons, emphasizing this is an unacceptable reality. In Gaza, the UN Food Monitor now confirms famine conditions have ended. The International Food Security Phase Classification, IPC, says Gaza is no longer in Phase 5, catastrophe, and that famine is not prevailing anywhere in the Strip, claiming the ceasefire and a sharp increase in humanitarian aid since October 10th are responsible. However, the organization still classified Gaza as being in Phase 4, an emergency level of food insecurity, a claim Israel strongly disputes, along with the famine accusation, which did not materialize into widespread hunger-related deaths. Israel's Kolgat agency, which coordinates aid into Gaza, called the report distorted, biased, and unfounded, saying it misleads the international community and ignores verified data. According to Kolgat, more than 500,000 metric tons of food have entered Gaza since the ceasefire, far exceeding the population's nutritional requirements, including those accepted by the IPC itself. The IDF says it killed 2 Palestinian terror operatives who crossed the Gaza ceasefire line. The operatives approached reservists in a way the military said posed an immediate threat. The Israeli Air Force then struck and eliminated the terrorists. Separately, the army released footage showing the demolition of Hamas tunnels on the Israeli side of the Yellow Line in the Han Yunis area. And that is all for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. You can scan the QR code on your screen in order to see more information on our ILTV app. I hope you enjoyed this broadcast. Thanks for watching.
When you buy from Blessed by Israel, you're not just shopping, you're standing with the families of Israel's heartland. Every bottle of delicious olive oil, handcrafted necklace, or jar of honey carries the spirit of Judea and Samaria. These, along with many more products, are the tastes, scents, and stories of the Promised Land, made by people rebuilding our biblical homeland every day. Shop now at blessedbyisrael.com and use ILTV's special code BLESSISRAEL for 10% off on your first order.
Welcome to Axis of Truth. I'm Emily Schrader, and today we're on the heels of a horrific terror attack in Australia against the Jews, and a wave of chaos across the world as well. All this as the Jewish community globally begins Hanukkah, which should be a time of joy and of light. Now, don't get me wrong, today we'll talk about the good news this week, but not before I break down some of the most pernicious lies that we're hearing about the Jewish community first. So to kick things off, Australia. Now, as we now know, two Islamist terrorists believed to have associations with ISIS attacked a Jewish community Hanukkah event with thousands of people at Bondi Beach in Sydney on Sunday. At least 16 have been killed, including children and Rabbi Eli Schlanger, and dozens more have been injured. The terrorists were able to fire more than 70 shots at the crowd before the Australian police apprehended them. And in the midst of all this, an unlikely hero emerged. Ahmed El Ahmed, an Arab Muslim himself, hid behind a car behind one of the shooters and jumped out to tackle him, disarming the terrorist before dropping the weapon and putting his hands up in order to avoid police mistakenly thinking that he was one of the terrorists. Now, in the process, he was shot 2 times and he's now recovering in the hospital. But this triggered a sort of bizarre social media argument over the weekend that I think needs to be addressed. Now, as I saw countless Israelis and Jews celebrating the heroism of Ahmed, I saw just as many, if not more, pro-Hamas accounts claiming that Jews/Mossad/Zionists, etc., are mad because a Muslim stopped the terror attack. This is colossally stupid and displays the profound ignorance of these baboons for several reasons. First off, it's simply not true. I haven't seen Israelis who were upset that it was a Muslim who saved lives. I did, however, see countless anti-Semitic conspiracy theorists who were trying to claim that this terror attack was a false flag attack, and then using the fact that the hero was a Muslim as somehow evidence that he foiled this Mossad attack, because no Muslims work for Mossad, am I right? The ignorance of these people is truly mind-boggling, and it is yet another exercise in deflection and a failure of many in the Muslim community who are fomenting these conspiracy theories to take responsibility for the fact that, yet again, there has been a savage, barbaric terror attack against Jews in the name of Islam that's been fueled by over 2 years of outlandish disinformation about Israel and Gaza that's been permitted by the Australian government to be freely proliferated through blatantly anti-Semitic rhetoric. See for yourself. But almost as insane as the conspiracy theories is the insinuation that Jews somehow don't think Muslims can be heroes or good people, which brings me to the second reason that this debate is dumb. As we saw on October 7th, Israeli Muslims, which make up nearly 20% of our citizens, were also viciously targeted by Hamas and slaughtered the same as Jews. Some of them were even kidnapped and held hostage. Israeli Muslims have been victims of Islamist terror throughout Israel's history, and they've also been, in many cases, heroes fighting against it. Many Arab Israelis took action on October 7th, risking their own lives to save their Jewish compatriots from the Nova Festival and the kibbutzim. In some cases, they even diverted Hamas terrorists by misleading them in Arabic. Arab Muslims fight in the IDF and serve loyally in Gaza, fighting against Hamas and the terror that harms their families too. We aren't surprised as Israelis at the fact that there are heroic Muslims, so why should anyone else be? Incidents like the Sydney Hanukkah attack aren't about Muslims. They're about Islamists who believe in an ideology of Islamic supremacy. And that is why they build conspiracies for the terrorists who do actually commit heinous acts of violence in the name of their religion. Finally, this debate is absurd because the attack itself was carried out by Islamist terrorists. Again, in fact, in the past 30 years, approximately 95,000 terror attacks have been committed by Islamists or Marxist Islamists. There's no denying that this is a problem, and it's a problem that harms Muslims too. In fact, they're usually the victims of such Islamist extremism. So enough with this stupidity. The terror attack at Bondi Beach was horrific. And it is true that the fact that a Muslim man intervened to heroically save lives does not negate the fact that yet another terror attack was carried out in the name of that Islamist cause. But we have no problem applauding the courageous heroism displayed by Ahmed al-Ahmed in this horrible event, nor recognizing that many Muslims are like him too. Enough. Now let's discuss some of the biggest stories this week that you need to know about. First off, the 83% myth. Now, one of the claims that is continuing to rise in popularity is that, according to IDF reports, 83% of the casualties in Gaza are civilians. This is something that has been parroted around by mindless morons like Anna Kasparian and all her mentally challenged ilk.
So Israeli papers got a hold of the IDF's internal data in regard to civilian casualties in Gaza. And their own data indicates 83% of people slaughtered in Gaza, 83% are civilians.
And also picked up by sources like The Guardian, which presented it as hard evidence of Israeli malice in Gaza, when in reality, it's a case study in what happens when journalism decides to become a political project. The reality is that this statistic isn't true at all, and I know because I've actually read many of the source documents for this ridiculous claim. So let's break it down a little bit more. First, I have to preface this all by saying it is impossible to produce accurate fatality counts in real time during an active war. Every military expert knows this. Hamas now claims that 62,000 people have been killed in the Gaza war. They do not report that any of them are combatants. And they include natural deaths as well as Gazans killed by their own failed rockets. They also don't allow anyone to verify anything. On the other side, Israel reports that at least 22,000 combatants have been killed, and an additional 2,100 have been killed since March 2025 alone. If you simply do the math, even using the Hamas inflated totals, the civilian to combatant ratio is under 2-1. That's far below the ratios of 3-1 or 5-1 recorded in U.S. campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan. So already this whole genocide narrative is falling apart. So where does this 83% claim come from? It comes from an IDF document listing about 8,900 known Hamas operatives from before the war that the IDF has confirmed they killed. It is not a list of all combatants. It only denotes names that Israel knew prior to October 7th. It also doesn't include anyone from Islamic Jihad or from other Gaza terror groups, nor does it include the more than 15,000 new Hamas recruits that joined after October 7th. It also doesn't include Hamas leaders, nor does it include the thousands of civilians who actively participated in combat, which we know took place because we saw it ourselves during the thousands who invaded during the October 7th massacre. Now, despite all this, The Guardian then makes the absurd claim that anyone who was not on that pre-war list must therefore be a civilian. That's not analysis. This is a total misunderstanding of war. Many terrorists died in tunnels. Many died in collapsed buildings. Many were killed in close quarters battles where there's no body to recover and no name to record. And on top of all of this, the IDF has utterly rejected the Guardian's claim and said that the numbers they printed don't reflect any data in their systems. The truth is simple. The 83% claim isn't journalism. It's propaganda focused on a selective data point, named combatants in Hamas prior to October 7th, and then uses it to manufacture this false moral narrative. And it does so by applying a standard of warfare that isn't applied to any other war in history. all for the purpose of falsely accusing Israel of having 83% civilian casualties. And now a little bit more happy story, at least for us. An Iranian professor at the University of Arkansas who loves the Islamic Republic has been removed from her leadership position after a series of revelations showed that she praised the Islamic regime in Iran, supported a convicted regime murderer, and even used official university letterhead to do it. Shireen Saidi, who taught political science and directed the university's Middle East Studies Center, has come under intense scrutiny for her public statements and actions linked to supporters of the regime. Now, documented posts show that she's praised Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of the Islamic regime, including messages in which she defended him in response to me, after the regime issued statements calling for violence against Israel. She also repeated regime talking points in her personal posts, framing Israel as a genocidal state, while, of course, expressing affection for a dictator responsible for mass repression and global terror activity. But it was another discovery that caused even greater outrage. She signed a letter supporting Hamid Nouri, a former regime official who was convicted in Sweden for his role in the 1988 mass execution of political prisoners. In that case, Nouri was found guilty of participating in the torture and execution of thousands. Records show that Saidi signed this letter using official University of Arkansas letterhead, of course, giving the false impression that her support was in some way representative of the institution itself. This was widely seen as an abuse of her position and a misuse of public resources. Now, she also faces allegations that she's misrepresented elements of her academic background with inconsistencies in her professional credentials. Now, the university has confirmed that she has been removed from her directorship after these issues came to light, but she remains a member of the faculty, which isn't good enough. Iranian dissidents and human rights activists, including myself, have sharply condemned her actions. They're arguing that her behavior reflects a pattern of regime sympathizers using Western academic institutions to legitimize the Islamic regime and to whitewash the crimes of individuals like Hamid Nouri. Her public praise of Khamenei and her support for a convicted regime executioner should obviously raise national security concerns in the United States. This is not merely a matter of a controversial opinion. It's not a free speech issue. When a U.S.-based educator uses her position and her university's name to advocate not only for a hostile regime, but for a convicted perpetrator of mass murder, it becomes a question of national security. It's time for Shireen to face deportation back to the regime that she loves so much. The incident just goes to show how regime propaganda can infiltrate American institutions very easily when proper safeguards fail. And it shows why removing her from her position was not only appropriate, but necessary. Now, one of the most repetitive and pernicious accusations that's leveled against Israel throughout this war is that Israel is targeting journalists. From commentators to human rights groups to some major news outlets, the claim has been made that hundreds of journalists have been killed by the IDF as a matter of policy, and that this somehow proves that Israel seeks to silence the media. But a new study has shattered that narrative and exposed how misleading it has become. According to new research published by the Meir Amit Intelligence and Terrorism Information Center last week, the majority of those alleged journalists killed in Gaza were either affiliated with terror organizations or operatives themselves. The study examined the identities of 266 individuals who have been reported as media workers or journalists that died during the Gaza war. Now, of those 266, at least 157 were found to be operatives or at least affiliated with terror groups such as Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, clearly indicating that they were not neutral observers or press. That means that roughly 60% of the people, just that we can confirm, who were labeled as journalists were in fact connected to violent terror organizations, not independent reporters trying to cover the story of what's happening in Gaza. Now, these findings are important because they show how easy it is for terrorist combatants to use the label of journalist as cover for their military or propaganda, in some cases, role. It's also something that we saw on October 7th with numerous journalists, alleged journalists, taking part in the massacre itself. Now, that said, Real journalists have been killed in this war, and that is a tragedy. Media workers daily put their lives on the line to report from active combat zones, and their loss is real, and it matters. But the factual reality is this. The loss of life in a war zone, in and of itself, doesn't prove the targeting of journalists by the IDF. What makes this study significant is that it exposes the monolithic claims as misleading. When individuals working for or with terror groups are counted as journalists without disclosure of their affiliations, it distorts the picture. It creates a narrative in which Israel is portrayed as systematically targeting the press, when in reality, many of those killed were engaged in propaganda or even offensive operations on behalf of these armed terror groups. Now, as a journalist myself, the distortion of facts does real damage to the cause of press freedom itself, because it makes every journalist in a war zone more vulnerable when combatants disguise themselves as members of the press. In a war where information is weaponized and propaganda runs rampant, the public deserves accurate context. And what this study makes clear is that labeling every media worker killed in Gaza as a victim of targeting by Israel is simply not supported by the evidence. And with all of that settled this week, I want to shift gears a little bit and take a look at the good, the bad, and the ugly stories of this week. The good this week comes from a place the Islamic regime in Iran works desperately to control, the holy city of Mashhad. And yet even there, even inside a mosque, the regime couldn't silence the public. At the memorial service for Khosrow Ali Kurdi, the human rights lawyer who died after months of pressure, interrogation, and threats from security forces, mourners did really what was the unthinkable. Inside the mosque itself, they chanted "Long live the Shah," an open declaration of support for Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. Take a look. Now, hearing monarchist chants in a religious institution inside Iran is almost unprecedented in today's Iran and has shattered one of the regime's most aggressively protected red lines. After the ceremony, security forces did move in. They arrested Ali Kurdi's brother, along with several very well-known dissidents who attended and took part in these protests, who have also been targeted repeatedly for their opposition to the Islamic Republic. Their crime was simply chanting for the return of the Shah and honoring a lawyer killed under state pressure. But the regime's crackdown isn't succeeding because outside the mosque, a large protest erupted in the streets of Mashhad, where crowds once again chanted for the crown prince and against the dictatorship. Videos shared online show Iranians shouting the same monarchist slogans heard inside the mosque, proving the message had already spread far beyond the memorial. At the same time, strikes continued across the country, including steelworkers, teachers, and transport workers, all signaling a public that has reached a breaking point with tyranny and economic collapse. From the mosque to the streets, Iranians are increasingly claiming their future, and they're doing it together louder than the regime can silence. This is the only way for the Iranian people to reclaim their country from the mullahs in power. Now, for the bad story this week, we need to talk about a stunning development in the Gaza war that exposes how Hamas has manipulated human suffering to score political points. Shocking, right? A reporter and activist from Gaza released footage last week of a warehouse under the Gaza Ministry of Health stocked with tons of baby formula and nutritional drinks meant for infants and young children that was never distributed to Gaza families. This wasn't a mere storage facility, it was a stash of infant food hid away during a supposed famine. The claim is simple and damning. Hamas deliberately hoarded these supplies in order to worsen the humanitarian crisis and to bolster its narrative that Israel is starving Gazan children. The terrorist group stored the formula at the height of the food shortages several months ago, leaving babies without essential nutrition, all while publishing images of starving families in Gaza all around the world. Now, of course, this strategy allowed Hamas to fuel international outrage and pressure Israel, even as it retained control over aid and who could access it. And why? Because Hamas wanted to force the return of UNRWA's aid distribution system because UNRWA works with Hamas. All this while they were violently threatening the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which was the alternative aid distribution organization that was designed to bypass Hamas control. Now, this is a calculated move that puts civilian lives, including the lives of infants, at risk in order to manufacture a political narrative. Whether or not one gives Israel the benefit of the doubt on how supplies are distributed or if enough aid went into Gaza, there is now evidence that Hamas has been part of the problem and not a victim of it. Once again, we see that Hamas is willing to sacrifice the lives of infants in Gaza for their genocidal, Jew-hating cause. And finally, the ugly story this week, which is not only ugly but particularly heinous, a story that reveals the depths of barbarity that Israel is up against. The family of Noah Marciano, the 19-year-old soldier kidnapped by Hamas on October 7th, has released new details about how she died in Gaza, and what they have learned is almost too cruel to comprehend. According to the information shared with her family, Noah was wounded but alive when she was kidnapped and taken to a hospital in Gaza. Now, she was in the care of people who were supposed to save lives, but instead of treating her, the medical staff killed her. They injected air into her veins, a method that causes a fatal embolism, and they did it intentionally. They signed her death warrant inside a clinic that was meant for healing. And this wasn't a death in the middle of battle or a stray bullet, but a calculated execution that was carried out by medical personnel who used that training to kill a wounded hostage. I mean, imagine the level of dehumanization of Jews for a doctor to do such a thing. Now, her family also says that her body was kept in the same building for days after, before being moved and left in the open as fighting in Gaza intensified. Even in death, she was used as a tool of war, with Hamas falsely claiming that she was killed in an IDF airstrike. And how do we know this? Well, because Hamas savages filmed the murder and sent a video of Noah Marciano dying to her father via telegram, a fact he revealed only this past week. This is the ugly reality of Hamas's tactics. They not only murder, they also corrupt the most sacred spaces in society, like hospitals, and turn clinics into killing rooms. A doctor violated his own Hippocratic oath to murder an innocent hostage. And then she was used as a negotiating pawn to torture her family. Now, according to reports, the family of Noah shared these details now because they believe it's important that the world understands exactly what was done to her, what was done to all the hostages, and to ensure that no one calls these acts anything other than what they are: savage barbarity. Well, that's it for this Hanukkah week on Axis of Truth. We'll be back soon with more interviews and more stories. I'm Emily Schrader. Be sure to follow me on social media, Emily K. Schrader or Emily in Tel Aviv. Thanks for watching and see you next week on Axis of Truth, only on JNS.
And as Hanukkah shines a light on Jewish sovereignty and resilience, Regavim is warning of a quieter battle unfolding across Israel's heartland. Recent studies reveal how illegal construction and infrastructure are reshaping reality on the ground and threatening Israel's control over key areas, including Jerusalem. Let's take a look.
Regavim calls it a silent takeover, not marked by dramatic confrontations, but by steady, illegal construction that is changing facts on the ground and weakening Israel's sovereignty. The organization applies its methods across Israel and has helped shape national policy in the Negev and the Galilee. But as Hanukkah shines a light on the roots of Jewish sovereignty, this report focuses on the biblical heartland, Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria, the places most closely tied to the Hashmonaim struggle. For example, a Regavim study presented last month to the Knesset Interior and Environment Committee focused on Jerusalem and revealed a striking imbalance. Since 1999, more than 2,500 illegal structures have been built in open areas of eastern Jerusalem, compared to just 68 in the west. In total, the city has lost more than 3,500 dunams of open land, designated initially as green spaces and future development reserves. The data is based on GIS mapping, aerial imagery, and extensive fieldwork. According to the study, nearly all illegal construction in open areas occurs in eastern Jerusalem, yet enforcement remains uneven. Moreover, years of neglect have allowed illegal building to spread unchecked, damaging natural landscapes, heritage sites, and creating serious urban blight and security threats. The study also challenges the claim that illegal construction is driven by overcrowding. Regavim found that several neighborhoods with high rates of illicit building have some of the lowest population densities in the world. Regavim says illegal construction is a national challenge and is warned that it is being used as a political tool to alter Israel's character and control over land. The Jerusalem findings fit into a much broader picture. For example, for more than a decade, Regavim has documented a coordinated Palestinian Authority effort to seize control of Area C through illegal construction, agriculture, and infrastructure. Despite the fact that international law recognizes Israel's full jurisdiction in Area C, international actors have spent hundreds of millions of dollars and euros to support this illegal activity. Central to the Palestinian Authority's strategy of quiet annexation is a vast network of unauthorized roads. Regavim's research shows that illegal road construction in Area C has nearly doubled over the past 15 years, enabling further land grabs and posing serious security risks. Regavim says the consequences are clear. Each illegal road and structure erodes Israeli sovereignty and narrows the window for effective action. This Hanukkah, the lesson is the same as it was 2,000 years ago. Sovereignty is not preserved by words alone. It must be defended on the ground, in real time, and before it's lost.
Welcome to ILTV Security Brief. I'm Khaled Ben David. Each week, we focus on the latest developments in security and defense relating to Israel and the Middle East, impacting on this region and beyond. And we start with our top items of the past week. An IDF drone strike on Gaza City takes out Raed Saad, a top Hamas military commander, seen as one of the key planners of the October 7th terror attack. President Trump says the U.S. is examining whether the operation was a violation of the ceasefire treaty. The U.S. holds a summit in Qatar to establish guidelines and create a command structure for the planned International Stabilization Force, planned to provide security in post-war Gaza. Envoys from 45 nations take part, but not from Turkey, in response to Israeli objections to Turkish participation in the Gaza force. In its latest operation in Lebanon, the IDF strikes and eliminates a Hezbollah terrorist operating in the ILTV area. The terrorist was engaged in intelligence gathering on IDF forces and involved in attempts to rehabilitate Hezbollah military infrastructure in South Lebanon in violation of the ceasefire agreement between Israel and the Lebanese government. A report in the Washington Post exposes new details about U.S.-Israel cooperation leading up to and during the Iran war, claiming that President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu had begun discussions on joint action against Tehran's nuclear facilities as early as last February, and deliberately fed media reports about disagreements on Iran policy as part of a deception campaign. Germany's Bundestag approves a €3 billion expansion of the Arrow 3 program after earlier this month deploying the initial installation of the long-distance missile system it purchased from 2 years ago from Israel in a landmark defense deal worth €4 billion. And now our big story. Officials from over 40 nations gathered in Qatar this week in an effort to advance plans for an international stabilization force to be deployed in Gaza as the first real step of phase 2 of the ambitious U.S. plan to rebuild and reform the Strip. But the summit provided more questions than answers. What nations will take part in the force? Where in Gaza will it be deployed? And what will its responsibilities be? And crucially, if that will include a role in disarming Hamas. Now, these are some of the issues expected to be decided in a crucial meeting between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu set for December 29th. Well, for more on this and other issues, we're joined in studio by ILTV correspondent Alec Pollard. Also joining us from the U.S. is Dr. Eric Mandel. He's the founder and director of MEPIN, the Middle East Political Information Network. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Eric, I'm going to start with you about this summit meeting. Nothing was set in stone there, but it does look like, for example, the issue of Turkey has been resolved, or do you think that may still be an open question? Because we know President Trump does want Ankara to be part of this.
So thank you for having me. So far, at least in the States, the Doha meeting is considered not a success, more a temporary failure than a success. They discussed different ways countries could participate in the international stabilization force. They could send troops, they could have law enforcement officers, they could do logistical support, they can train Palestinian police officers, they could fund it. But what we've learned is nobody wants to go into the international stabilization force. And the ones that might want to go in want to be on the Israeli side of the yellow line, which makes no sense whatsoever. They want to be protected by the IDF. And it gets us to the big question. The United Nations Security Council resolution and the 20-point plan said there's supposed to be a demilitarization and disarmament. And nobody wants to do that, so they're kicking the can down the road. We're going to move on with some other things. Parallel to that is putting together this board of peace. And supposedly there's now international buy-in from European countries, including Qatar, that's going to oversee the post-war management. But Israel is going to be in a very difficult position going forward because the president wants to use Gaza as a victory. I was at the White House this week. He talked about he's created peace in the Middle East. And that is a euphemism that he has made peace in Gaza, and he does not want to see any kinetic activity there, which means expect tremendous pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu this December, whether it's pressure to have Turkey join a force or be involved in some way, or whether it's to tell Israel to stop dealing with the provocations of Hamas. So there's a lot of things up in the air here, but the one thing we know is that the only pressure that the president seems willing to apply is on Israel, and Israel is falling potentially into a trap where international forces that are part of the International Stabilization Force can end up being like a shield for Hamas. And that could end up, when those soldiers die, it's going to be Israel that's blamed. And the longer this drags on without clarity, the worse it's going to be for Israel and U.S.-Israel relations.
Yeah, so, well, how about that, Alec? Because Israel's experience with international forces on its borders is not good, and you've put them into the mix there in Gaza, when Israel is still carrying out military operations against Hamas, as we have seen, not just along the yellow line, but even within the Hamas-held areas of Gaza. That's going to be a very tricky situation for the IDF.
Definitely very tricky. I mean, Israel's worst experience with international forces is probably UNIFIL in southern Lebanon that basically weren't able to tackle Hezbollah in any way. And that's really what this comes down to. Nobody wants to be in that position to be perceived, especially these countries that are Muslim countries, to be perceived as fighting Hamas. Nobody wants to be there. That's why we've seen a lot more willingness, for example, to provide training, to provide resources, to provide finances, but not to be the actual force. Now, regarding the countries that are on the list, I would say that probably the worst country for Israel to be in that position would be Turkey, which is where maybe the United States is pushing this because of their Muslim Brotherhood affiliations. The best country on the list for Israel is Azerbaijan, without a doubt. Azerbaijan has close security ties with Israel, but we know that Turkey is actually pushing to push Azerbaijan out of that list. So Turkey has been pressuring not to have countries like Azerbaijan or maybe Italy, maybe Indonesia, which is also not a terrible option for Israel. They're trying to push them out.
Why is Indonesia the world's largest Muslim nation, but one that Israel doesn't have any direct conflicts with? Why would that be problematic?
Why would it be problematic for them to be in Gaza?
Yes.
It would be probably, look, Indonesia, it's an interesting case. I've been to Indonesia. It's a country that there have been talks about possible normalization. They're a country that is not as, Muslim Brotherhood kind of affiliated like Turkey or Qatar, but it's a question mark. Still, I don't see any force of Indonesia, for example, tackling the Hamas disarmament, but it would be better than Turkey.
Right. And what about you mentioned this sort of board of peace beyond the military aspect? It's been a little problematic for Israel because we've talked about that board of peace overseeing a administration of Gaza that would be Palestinians, so-called technocrats, supposedly apolitical, no affiliation, certainly not with Hamas or with the Palestinian Authority. But are there really going to be any Palestinians that will willing to take on that role that don't have, in some way or another, connection, certainly at least with the Palestinian Authority?
So that's a very good question. The idea that you're going to find Palestinians who are truly independent and won't be intimidated or won't fear for their families if they act truly independently and what's in the best interest of Palestinians is going to be very hard. Whether you're dealing with affiliations to Hamas, whether you're dealing with affiliations to the Palestinian Authority. Remember, the Palestinian Authority is the same agency that has created the Pay for Slave program. It has stolen billions in money. You have a octogenarian and Abbas who leads them, who leads not only the PA, but the PLO and the Fatah, who is someone who just has old cronies. The polls of Palestinians don't trust them. So, I think there's a certain fantasy here of saying that we're going to have, that the PA is good, Hamas bad. I think people need to look totally differently at what's going on here, that this is a generational problem. And if they really want to deal with not just the immediate, which unfortunately the West needs to do, they have to have some things that to be buying into, starting with the de-radicalization right from their school systems. Whether it's in Judea, Samaria, Gaza. So it's going to be problematic of whoever is going to be involved here. And again, Israel is going to pay a huge price because the 47%, the western part of Gaza, Hamas is dominant. Hamas is entrenched. Hamas still has a huge tunnel network that people don't realize. And no international stabilization force wants to be on that side. So going forward here, the president thinks he can have some political victories, maybe towards a Nobel Prize. But this is going to, it's almost a tale of two ceasefires. Israel's allowed to do what it can in Lebanon, but this ceasefire, tremendous pressure on Israel to hold back. And this can turn into Lebanon from 1982 to 2000. And again, you went back to what Alex said about a UNIFIL force there. I've been up in the north many, many times. Not a good scenario that you want for the long term.
All right. A tale of two ceasefires. Alec, I want to relate this to another issue because we talk about what kind of leverage President Trump might have on Prime Minister Netanyahu. And certainly one area is the whole threat of Iran. We just had a report published by the Washington Post saying, revealing new details about the U.S.-Israel cooperation in taking out Iran's nuclear facilities in the so-called 12-day war. Closer than we thought, according to the Washington Post, and planning for that really went back all the way to February. Let's talk about that because, and keep in mind that the outgoing Mossad chief, David Barnea, said that it's almost inevitable now. Israel is going to have to strike out against Iran again as Iran rushes to rebuild its nuclear facilities.
Yeah, and that's going to be a very difficult thing for Israel to do because there's this massive split inside the Republican Party, inside the MAGA movement concerning these the Iran strike. There were prominent figures speaking out very, very strongly against, and Trump is able to keep that coalition together for now and was able to get that strike down, go in and out basically, hit, and then extricate the U.S. from involvement in the war. But I mean, if it goes to the direction of Israel needing to strike again, and then maybe sometime down the line again, meaning it becomes a constant thing, I don't know how politically tenable that is for Israel from like an international support standpoint or an American standpoint.
Right, I think the American supported.
The American, like I said, there was tremendous pressure on Trump internally. I'm not talking about the Democrats. Internally, inside the Republican Party, the isolationist wing there that's growing and growing, led by like the likes of Tucker Carlson and so forth, that just are really outspoken, saying we do not want this, and it's a problem to get the support from the American administration to say we need to strike Iran again. There's going to be a huge outroar over that. So it's definitely a problem. On the other hand, we do see that even when out in the media, sometimes there might be some disagreements. It's behind the scenes. Cooperation is close. This deception that was revealed.
Right, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu supposedly deliberately fed the media reports of disagreements over Iran in order to lull the Iranians into complacency.
I think the security establishment that's close to Trump and the likes of, for example, Secretary of State Rubio and so forth, they understand the Iranian threat and they do want that proactive action. But the base, the voter base, I don't know if they're there. And in the end of the day, Trump is like Netanyahu. He's always attuned to his base and what people are saying. And if it's unpopular in the base, then it's going to be hard to get Trump on board to continue to have that posture and to actually strike, to have just the posture, maybe to have the posture of we're not going to let Iran have a nuclear weapon and to say we support Israel and that and so forth. But to actually, if Israel comes to the U.S. and says we need to strike again.
Well, let me get Eric's view on that from the U.S.
So I'm going to take a different angle here. I think when you bring up not you, but whether it's the Mossad chief or people talk about Iran, they go right to the nuclear program. I think the nuclear program, of course, is an existential threat, but I think the immediate is the ballistic program. And the ballistic program, the Iranians, very clear, we need to listen to what they say, because what they say is what they plan on doing. They want to flood Israeli airspace with ballistic missiles to overwhelm its defenses, and they are supposedly rebuilding that at a rapid speed. And the Iranians again, they play the long game. Israel can hit ballistic facilities, whether you're talking about the production of solid fuel missiles, launchers, things like that, and they can do that without American help. The problem is, what they need from America is diplomatic protection, and will any president going into a congressional year, with especially of a party, the Republicans, that are expected to lose in the midterm elections, do they want to be shown that they're supporting Israel, which is not popular, not only amongst the Democrats, but as Alex said, there's a certain group within the Republicans of the Tucker Carlson wing that does not want to have military action. So keep the eye on ballistic missiles, and it's only a matter of when. It's not a matter of if. And Iran is also trying to increase its proxy. It's going back $1 billion.
Well, hold off on about Eric, on the proxies, because I do want to shift focus a little bit, but it is related, because after that horrifying attack at Sydney's Bondi Beach Hanukkah celebration that left 15 dead, we have to shift a little from Israel's security to the security of the diaspora Jewish community. Now, the surge of anti-Semitism that erupted globally after the October 7th attack shows no signs of abating, and Jewish communities abroad are tempting soft targets for extremists and terrorists. Let's hear from a member of the Australian Jewish community and Prime Minister Netanyahu.
For 2.5 years, we have put up with daily protests which have become incubators of hate. There's a ceasefire in the Middle East. Israel launched a defensive action against a listed terrorist organisation that took more than 1,200 innocent lives and hundreds of Israelis hostage. And you have allowed these protests unabated to go on for 2.5 years, destroying businesses and now destroying lives. Stop the protests.
אני דורש מממשלות המערב לעשות את מה שנדרש כדי להילחם באנטישמיות ולתת את הביטחון הדרוש, את ההבטחה הדרושה לקהילות היהודיות בעולם. וכדאי שיקשיבו לאזהרות שלנו. אני דורש מהם פעולה עכשיו.
Yes, Eric, there is a potential Iran connection there because we know the IRGC did run an operation in Australia that was broken up this summer to utilize local criminal elements there to launch attacks against the Jewish community. Let me ask you, sitting there in the diaspora, how secure do you feel? What are steps being taken in across the world, even in the U.S., to safely protect Jewish communities under the current circumstances?
So in June, I was with the Council of Presidents of major Jewish organizations that was in Washington in Congress that was trying to lobby for more funding for security for synagogues, organizations, and the money wasn't there. You heard sympathetic words. So tangibly, it's less than one would expect. So that's the first thing. The question here is, when people scream, globalize the Intifada, and that's the easiest one of all the hate speech that we've had there, that is and needs to be considered, even in America, which prides itself on freedom of speech, that is screaming fire in a movie theater. That's how you know the definition of what's free speech and what goes beyond it. Globalize the Intifada is a call for violence. And that and many associated statements are very clear cause for attacks against Jews. And the other part in the United States is you have people who will say there's a big difference between Israelis and Jews. When I travel the Middle East, when they say, when they want to refer to an Israeli, they call them a Jew. There's no differentiation amongst the haters here in the United States. And how does going to your initial question, how does the American Jewish community feel? And I was at the White House this week, so with lots of Jewish leaders. The people are frightened, especially in our native city of New York. People are scared. There's almost daily incidents of attacks and coming in with a mayor who does not seem to want to protect Jewish people and certainly is an anti-Zionist. There is fear, and it's fear not just there, it's throughout the country. And so we're really at a pivotal time in the United States and the world. Listen, we just heard that, I think today, that there was another attempted attack in Australia, and that was thwarted. There are many of these things going on, and the world diaspora community is on edge.
Right, and what could Israel do to help out in these circumstances? And again, supposedly, for example, in Australia, that incident with the Iranian cell there, the Mossad actually provided authorities with some information to help stop that.
Well, that's probably the only thing Israel can really do is to try to, use its very substantial intelligence network to kind of warn and get warning of. But the fact that it's an Iranian cell or it's someone affiliated with ISIS or the famous lone wolf radicalized online narrative, these are just vessels that are containing the ideology, and the vessel can change. In the end of the day, it's jihad. It's jihad. Let's call it what it is. And it can target Jews and it can target non-Jews. We've seen all these terror attacks that have happened in Europe. And I think from the Israeli angle, there definitely is this attempt by some people to say that, okay, Hamas attacking Israel and various groups, it's like completely distinct from this event. But I think what you can try to do is to say, yes, it is connected. Like if you have these type of groups that are in Europe, some of them even wave ISIS flags and Hezbollah flags in the street. But even if you're waving Palestinian flags, thousands and thousands of people, it's a show of force that emboldens some of these groups to go and to commit attacks. Doesn't mean that every person who goes on a march and waves a Palestinian flag is a jihadist. Of course not. But we saw there the person in Australia who's saying these marches, what they do is they disseminate hate. They embolden those radicals to go and commit attacks. And let's not forget, Sydney Opera House, 2 days after October 7th, gas the Jews, F the Jews. Gas the Jews, F the Jews. So it's connected.
Right, and it accelerates a snowball of hate gathering to violence. Alec Pollard and, of course, Dr. Eric Mandel from MEPIN, thank you so much for joining us on ILTV Security Brief.
And
now a final word. With at least 15 dead, the massacre at Sydney's Bondi Beach was an unprecedented attack on a diaspora Jewish community in recent decades, but no one could say that this was unexpected. The attack was the horrifically logical consequence of years of incitement against Israel, Zionism, and Jews, and just the latest escalation in a series of anti-Semitic attacks directed against Jewish communities across the world. While the investigation into the Bondi incident is just beginning, some things are already clear. Chief among them, a shocking lack of security. Only 2 police officers were assigned to be on the scene to protect an open-air event with over 1,000 attendees, and both they and other police that arrived later to the scene were outgunned by the well-armed terrorists. This lapse is even more shocking when considering it was just last summer an Iranian-backed terror operation was uncovered in Australia that saw IRGC agents utilizing local criminals for hire to carry out attacks against the local Jewish community. Now, it's not clear why Australian authorities were so complacent about the Bondi Hanukkah event when the writing was on the wall, or also why its Jewish community organizers failed to provide more private security when it became clear this could be the case. Perhaps because the event was held in such a public, popular place as Bondi Beach, rather than a specifically Jewish site such as a synagogue or a community center. But this is exactly the kind of dangerously lax assumption that terror groups and individuals look to exploit. It's beyond time for governments in Australia and elsewhere to take more seriously the threat posed to diaspora Jewish communities. This extends beyond providing them with just the needed physical security. These incidents, as we said, are fueled by the provocative actions and dangerous incendiary rhetoric spewed at pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel rallies since October 7th. While freedom of speech and assembly are fundamental rights in any democracy, those rights do not extend to racist declarations and incitement to violence, targeting Jews, Israelis, and Zionists. And even when such language is deemed legal, too many organizations and individuals in these societies are tolerant of a demonization of Israel and Israelis that would be deemed unacceptable when applied to any other nation and peoples. The Bondi massacre was a warning to governments across the world to stop underestimating the threat now posed to their own Jewish communities. And those communities must also now realize that they have to do more to provide for their own means of security before the next such attack happens. Thank you for joining us on ILTV's Security Brief.
And moving on, Israel is pushing back against an upcoming UN-backed famine report on Gaza, saying it ignores key data from Israeli and American aid coordinators. We hear more from ILTV's Devo Klein.
The Defense Ministry's Kogat says the IPC Famine Monitor did not seek input from Israel or the U.S.-led Civil Military Coordination Center ahead of the report's release. According to official Israeli data, since the ceasefire began, between 600 and 800 trucks of humanitarian goods entered Gaza every single day. More than 25,000 food trucks have entered the Strip, delivering over 500,000 tons of food. That's around 70% of all aid provided. Israel stresses that only about 20% of this aid was delivered by the United Nations. The vast majority was sent by foreign governments, international organizations, and the private sector, with Israel facilitating every single shipment. In addition, 6,700 tons of medical supplies have entered Gaza, along with nearly 310,000 tents and tarpaulins. More than 1,800 trucks of winter clothing and blankets have been delivered, together with over 26,000 tons of hygiene products. Just in the past week, more than 300 trucks of flour entered the enclave. Israel says these deliveries amount to more than 5 times Gaza's internationally defined nutritional requirements, based on World Food Program standards, figures previously cited by the IPC itself. Data from the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics shows food prices in Gaza have dropped by around 80% since the summer, a development Israel says directly reflects the massive increase in supplies. Israel notes that previous IPC warnings of imminent famine, including claims that famine had already begun, were later shown to be inaccurate, even by the IPC's own data. Yet those reports have been cited in international courts and used to accuse Israel of deliberately starving Gazans. Israel says it will continue to facilitate humanitarian aid at unprecedented levels, but warns that reports issued without full coordination, verified data, or ground reality risk becoming political documents rather than professional assessments.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Alec Pollard, coming to you live from Israel with the biggest stories in the region. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will reportedly present U.S. President Donald Trump with new plans for a potential strike on Iran when he visits the president at Mar-a-Lago at the end of the month. Jerusalem is deeply concerned that Tehran is not only rebuilding its nuclear program, damaged in the June war, but also ramping up ballistic missile production, potentially 3,000 per month if left unchecked. Israel sees the missiles as an immediate threat, fearing they could deter Israeli action against Iran or its regional proxies. In response to the reports, White House spokesperson Anna Kelly told reporters, as President Trump has said, if Iran pursued a nuclear weapon, that site would be attacked and would be wiped out before they even got close. According to Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam, the first phase of a plan to disarm Hezbollah south of the Litani River will be completed within a few days. The claim is being met with deep skepticism in Jerusalem and doubts from Washington. Israeli officials have repeatedly warned that similar promises in the past were never fully implemented, and that Hezbollah has a long record of hiding weapons, redeploying fighters, and operating underground despite international agreements. This comes amid growing concerns of a renewed conflict between Israel and the Iran-backed terror group. Israel insists any disarmament must be verifiable, irreversible, and enforced on the ground, not just declared by Beirut. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio struck a cautious tone, stopping short of expressing confidence that Hezbollah will actually be disarmed.
And we have tried to, in a cooperative way, to do everything we can to empower the Lebanese government to have the ability to do that. And so I hope that's what these talks are aimed towards, and we'll be supportive in every way we can to achieve that outcome. What I think is abundantly clear to everybody is no one is in favor of a Hezbollah that can once again threaten the region, act as a direct Iranian proxy, and obviously if they threaten Israel, we're not going to have peace. So we are hopeful that the talks between Lebanese authorities and the Israelis will create outlines and a way forward that prevents further conflict. I think I don't speak for the Israeli government. I can only tell you and echo what they've said publicly, and that is that if they feel threatened by Hezbollah, they will take actions in their defense against them.
Amid the alarming reports of Hamas's rebuilding of capabilities in the Gaza Strip, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met today with U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham in his office in Jerusalem. Senator Graham did not spare criticism of the reality on the ground and presented a gloomy picture of Hamas and Hezbollah's rebuilding attempts, saying, "We had a lot of achievements in 2025, and I want to make sure that 2026 will be a year of peace and of beating the bad guy." Hamas is not disarming, but rather rearming and trying to establish its rule in Gaza. This is an outcome that we simply cannot accept. Regarding the north, Graham said Hezbollah is also trying to produce more weapons, emphasizing this is an unacceptable reality. In Gaza, the UN Food Monitor now confirms famine conditions have ended. The International Food Security Phase Classification, IPC, says Gaza is no longer in Phase 5, catastrophe, and that famine is not prevailing anywhere in the Strip, claiming the ceasefire and a sharp increase in humanitarian aid since October 10th are responsible. However, the organization still classified Gaza as being in Phase 4, an emergency level of food insecurity, a claim Israel strongly disputes, along with the famine accusation, which did not materialize into widespread hunger-related deaths. Israel's Kolgat agency, which coordinates aid into Gaza, called the report distorted, biased, and unfounded, saying it misleads the international community and ignores verified data. According to Kolgat, more than 500,000 metric tons of food have entered Gaza since the ceasefire, far exceeding the population's nutritional requirements, including those accepted by the IPC itself. The IDF says it killed 2 Palestinian terror operatives who crossed the Gaza ceasefire line. The operatives approached reservists in a way the military said posed an immediate threat. The Israeli Air Force then struck and eliminated the terrorists. Separately, the army released footage showing the demolition of Hamas tunnels on the Israeli side of the Yellow Line in the Han Yunis area. And that is all for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. You can scan the QR code on your screen in order to see more information on our ILTV app. I hope you enjoyed this broadcast. Thanks for watching.
In the wake of the Bondi Beach Hanukkah massacre, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called on world leaders to combat anti-Semitism in their countries. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese claimed he's been doing just that. But Jews aren't buying it. This and more on Israel Undiplomatic. Hanukkah is a time of light, hope, and miracles, big and small. This year, you have a chance to bring a little miracle into your own life. We're excited to share the Dream Raffle, where you can win a fully furnished luxury apartment in Israel. Yes, an actual home of your own. Find the link in the description below and use the special code GELT, that's GELT, capital letters, to get 8% off the entire order. And if you purchase your tickets by December 22nd, you'll also be entered into our bonus raffle for a $15,000 cash prize. Buy your tickets today.
Shalom and welcome to another episode of Israel Undiplomatic. I'm Mark Regev, and as per usual, I'm here with my co-host, Ruthie Bloom.
Hello. I'm sorry it's under these circumstances today, Mark. You know, everybody knows that your background is as an Australian. I mean, you moved to Israel decades ago, and you also served as ambassador to the UK. But you grew up in Australia, and you still have siblings and extended family there and friends. And given the horrors this week at Bondi Beach, I was wondering if does it seem to you that this was predictable?
I'm not sure predictable, but it doesn't come as a total surprise. And the strange thing that me and many other Australians who live in Israel discovered this week is we're used to getting phone calls or WhatsApp messages from down under, from Australia, and they, you know, after missiles have fallen from Iran or after there's a terrible terrorist attack or whatever, and expressing concern. And this time the foot was on the other shoe or the shoe was on the other foot. That we were ringing them and asking them how they were, and checking do any of our loved specific family was hit, or do we know the people who were killed, and so forth and so on. Very difficult time for Australian Jews, and I think our audience needs to know the following thing about Australian Jews. I mean, of course, Australian Jews can count their history back to the very beginning of Australia, but the overwhelming majority of Australian Jews today are the descendants of what they call the post-war immigration wave, which is basically Holocaust survivors, like my father, who at the end of the Second World War wanted to get out of Europe, because for them Europe was one big graveyard. Europe was the place where their families had been murdered, where their communities had been decimated, where there was no home to go back to. And Australia was the furthest place away conceivable from Europe. It was a new country, and they thought, they could leave the horrors of Europe behind and move to a new country and start a new life. I remember I went to the Jewish school in Australia, the Jewish day school in Melbourne, and many of my friends had a parent, sometimes two parents, with number tattoos from the concentration camps, and it wasn't something abnormal. It was part of the reality we grew up in. And this whole idea that Australia was something different, it was a free country, a tolerant country, a country where people could contribute and succeed. And this Australia that we saw at Bondi Beach is something very different. Not the Australia that I remember that I grew up in. Of course, there was always, this anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic snobbery here or there, or some sort of prejudice, but didn't affect you. This is big. This is a change. And when I speak to people in Australia, or when I hear them being interviewed, they say, we're shocked, but we're not surprised. And it's been very difficult for Australian Jews. On one hand, you've got neo-Nazis. Maybe they've always been there, but they've come out of the woodwork more recently and are more prolific. They're more out there. They're more vocal. And you've also got radical leftists who are Palestine from the river to the sea. And then you've got a situation where you've got now, with a larger Muslim community, you've got Islamic anti-Semitism, Islamist, I should say, anti-Semitism, as we saw the perpetrators of the murders were. And it's a difficult time for Australian Jews. I'd add one more thing. When I was the ambassador to Britain, and there were threats on the Jewish community in the United Kingdom, the British government was, very strong in supporting the security and safety of British Jews, and British Jews would always express their praise for what the British government was doing to support the community and to make sure it was well protected from possible threats. My impression is that's not the situation in Australia with Australian Jews, that they were dismissed by many in authority as, like, there's an Australian word, I don't think it's an American word, they whinging, complaining, that they were, saying things, and, they were crybabies, so to speak, saying this sort of thing can happen. Well, guess what, Ruthie? It happened.
First of all, I'd like to say that the UK that is no longer safe for Jews either. The Jews I know in the UK say it's a disaster from that point of view. And let me say that you're right. Australia, those Holocaust survivors were right. Australia was a new frontier. It was a welcoming place, just like the United States. And as you said, the United States also had anti-Semitism, but basically Jews could flourish and did, and got into the highest positions, etc., and practiced any strain of Judaism in public, in private, whatever. There was no problem. And I take issue with you pointing to neo-Nazis, okay? Because that is exactly what Prime Minister Albanese was trying to do in the wake of this massacre. There's anti-Semites on both sides. There's the far right and there's the far left. No, this issue right now is an issue of jihad, global jihad. We've seen, and in Australia, one of the ways that we could see it really in living color, so to speak, is that on October 8th, the day after the October 7th massacre that Hamas committed against innocent Israelis, the day after, before the IDF even entered Gaza to retaliate or to rescue the hostages, Australians marched in thousands, screaming, "Gas the Jews." Not Israelis, gas the Jews. And then, since then, we have seen synagogues defaced, car bombs, all over Australia, mainly Melbourne and Sydney, where I assume that's where most of the Jews live in Australia. And all that time, Albanese was saying, yes, we must combat. We don't accept. These people are trying to, sow havoc on society. No, these people are trying to slaughter Jews. And he won't say it. And even when he says it, he right away says, this is terrible. This is, it reminds me of the Oslo years when people said that Palestinian terrorism was, it's extremism on both, it's enemies of peace. No. These are not enemies of peace. These are enemies of the West, what we saw on Bondi Beach. First and foremost, you kill the Jews, you kill Christians, you kill Westerners, but this was specifically Jewish. It was a Hanukkah party, and we have to stop cloaking it in other language. The other thing that Albanese did, which was disgusting, I mean, I'm at my wit's end with him, and that is, he said, he and all the leftists who support him, or even if they don't support him, their first response was, we need stricter gun control laws. As though, first of all, Australia already has strict gun control laws. Number two, the shooters, the father and son jihadists, the father had a licensed weapon. That's number two. Number three, guns don't kill people. People kill people. And having stricter gun laws does not prevent a radical ideology from spreading. And my last point is this. A lot has been made about the fact that ISIS flags were found in the car of these guys, and explosives and all kinds of things. And even President Trump mentioned ISIS. There's a lot of talk about that. And I would just like to say, yeah, ISIS. Is that it? You know what? There are Sunnis, there are Shiites, there's ISIS, there's Hezbollah, there's Hamas, there's Iran. You know, Iran and ISIS were not on the same page. But let me tell you, where global jihad is concerned, all of these vile specimens are in the same camp. And so I don't care that they're ISIS or whatever they are. What they are, they're global jihadists. They're jihadists with a mission. It was well planned, and they succeeded. And another thing, the Australian police, it took them 10 minutes before they were standing there. People were filming this stuff, and only the heroic actions of the civilians, people at the festival, actually helped the police apprehend the suspects. And here, again, I have one more point, and that is the hero who grabbed one of the terrorists from behind is a Muslim himself, a fruit stand owner. And I have to say, first of all, everyone is praising him as a hero, and he is a hero, and he is a Muslim.